Right before we begin, I'd just like to have a moment of silence for the victims and the families in Manchester, England. Tragedy that happened there. And also someone a lot closer that drove a bus for the Council on Aging and also worked at CVS. If you ever went to CVS, you always saw her smile. Christina Rushton Power. So if we could have a moment of silence for those people. Thank you. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, do the roll call for City Council meeting May 30th, 2017.
I'd be happy to, Mr. President. I'd be remiss if I didn't say welcome back.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, believe me.
Councilor Connell.
Yes. Here.
Councilor Cronin.
Present.
Councilor Devlin is absent. Councilor Earl.
Present.
Councilor Eigenman.
Here.
Councilor Junta is absent. Councilor Tontar.
Present.
Councilor Vogel.
Present.
Councilor Zede.
Present.
Councilor Cameron.
Here.
Council President O'Brien.
Here. Late file item?
There is one late file item, Mr. President. It's Communication 68. It's from the Immaculate Conception Parish. The concept is Ask a Priest, which would be on N Street from June 30th to September 1st.
Motion to waive the rules and accept the late file items.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Public comment. Elizabeth Heath.
Good evening, Council President, Councilors. I'm Elizabeth Heath, 25 Oak Street in Newburyport, and I'm the President of the Committee for an Open Waterfront. I'd just like to say that the Committee for an Open Waterfront, I'd like to thank Councilor Zede for listening to Cal and for including our main concern in his revised amendment to the Central Waterfront Ad Hoc Committee's document, namely that all of the NRA's dry land holdings be transferred to the Waterfront Trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Harris.
Good evening. I'm Bill Harris, 56 Lime Street, Newburyport. The public interveners that helped create the Waterfront Trust want to thank the ad hoc committee, all the members, all the city councilors, but especially councilors Eigerman and Zede, who worked hard to identify what the differences and vital interests were of all the participants. And we're not quite at the finish line, but because of the ad hoc committee, we are much closer to solutions so that we could amend the Waterfront Trust, provide adequate income so that we can pay off the Harbor Master facility, a garage if approved, and the essential downtown needs while preserving sufficient money so that the Waterfront Trust can do its job reliably with diverse income in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. John Brown.
Hi, my name is John Brown, and I'm here to speak about the transient vendor's license redrafting the city ordinance. I've been doing business as a spirit in Newburyport, featuring photographs and gift items since 2006. And even though I've had brick and mortar galleries during most of this time, I've been a transient vendor licensed artist on N Street since 2009, when I was granted the first non-food TVL in the city of Newburyport. For the past 8 years now, I have gained a lot of experience in seeing and listening to people, brick and mortar business, and patrons on N Street while selling my artwork. Tonight, the city ordinance draft before you gives the city council an opportunity to increase the artisan designation in a transient vendor's license in the downtown overlay district. I implore you to support this measure. Even though I appreciate this proposal, I still feel that the number of proposed artisan designated TVLs within the DOD under this current draft falls far short of making any significant creative economic impact on the area. During my conversations and opportunities for public input during the discourse of this current redrafting of the TVL city ordinance, I asked the LMP Oversight Committee one particular question directly, and that was, what is the impediment for the city in granting more artisan designated TVL on N Street or the city? The response has always been the brick and mortar business. All I can say is that somebody who's done business in N Street for the last 10 years, in my opinion, the artisan-designated TVLs would be an ideal way to transform underutilized areas of N Street that currently serve no major economic contribution to the immediate area or the heart of downtown shoppers district in any significant way whatsoever. This measure could be a very significant first step to correcting this short-sighted master plan oversight that calls for very little inclusion of art at all. And thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Leslie Echo.
Thank you. Leslie Echo, 36 Warren Street, and I'm speaking as a member of the Waterfront Trust. And I'm going to use my whole full 2 minutes. Regarding the ad hoc committee proposal settlement, I am not in agreement with the proposal to give the the downriver tidelands to the city. There are, number one, benefits to single ownership of the tidelands, belonging all of it to the Waterfront Trust. Secondly, forever is a long time to give away a property that is income generating, and we cannot predict the future needs of the Waterfront Trust and the parklands. We do know that as the park expands and parking decreases, the income to the Waterfront Trust will decrease, while park maintenance costs will increase. And the Waterfront Trust could very well then have a need of income from the tidelands. I can also see a future when the State Street could become a pedestrian way, in which case parking on the waterfront, particularly the east lot, will be lost. And again, the income will be lost to the Waterfront Trust, and they will be dependent on the tidelands for income. Finally, let's see, one thing that's not mentioned as a property that could go to the city would be a parcel on the west lot or the east lot for restrooms, information center, and perhaps a coffee shop, etc. That's not in the proposal, and I think there is acceptance of that by both the NRA and the Waterfront Trust. I'd like to make a suggestion. I did discuss this with the mayor. She's not quite in agreement with me, and it could be refined. But I was going to suggest that 3 appointees come from the mayor's office with approval by the city council, and that 4 appointees come from the city council itself. I'd like to suggest that people can self-nominate to the city council. And I think one of the benefits of the city council is that each of you know your wards, and you can reach out into the community to find talent for the Waterfront Trust. And I think that's something to be considered. I enjoyed Greg's suggestion about an election, but I do think an election is costly and it's time-consuming, and it might not allow us to attract the talent that we want. Next, I wanted the sliding income that Sharif suggested. I thought was very good, but it does need refinement. And finally, it's the recommendation of the NRA, and I think the Waterfront Trust, it's a recommendation of the NRA that the Custom House land and the lawn go directly to the Maritime Museum, so that that would be a real source of financial security for them. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Sandra, can you read the last name? Northern Boulevard, Plum Island? Thank you.
My name is Sandra Turner. I'm an artist and I'm from Plum Island. I've lived in the area 36 years. And I'm here just to voice my support for designation of artisan transit vendor licenses in Newburyport on Main Street. I sketch a lot outdoors, and I think that you know, a lot of people stop and talk to me, and I think, you know, having artists outside doing their craft or selling their wares, you know, adds a significant, just a type of personality to the city. And I think that with so much commercialization and like that, that it's something that's missing, and I would just hate to see it go away. So I'm just in support of having more than what I think is going to be proposed, but anything to start. So I just hope that the committee supports that.
Thank you. Susan Hearn?
I'll wait.
What's that?
I'll wait.
Okay. Bruce Shabaro?
Drew Shapiro, 20 Eagle Street. Thank you. Just wanted to commend the council on taking up the issue of reducing speed limits in the city to 25 miles per hour. Obviously, there's been some issues recently that have been noted in the paper about pedestrian safety and traffic safety in general. And obviously, I support the reduction in the speed limits. I just hope it can be part of a more holistic approach that the city can take to improving traffic safety in the city, and maybe take a look at the future about roadway design, intersection design, more bicycle facilities and better facilities for pedestrians, whether that's taking up a complete streets ordinance in the future or looking at other options. I think it's an important first step, so I commend this step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Ryan?
Good afternoon. Patrick Ryan, 10 Bromfield Street, Newburyport. I'm here in support of the artisan vendor's license on In Street. I think we all agree In Street's a terrific resource of the city, and it's being underutilized. And by stepping forward, a forward-thinking approach, and licensing local crafts and artisans, I think will be a boon to the city. Much like year-round effort, or most of the year, with the farmers market on the cannery, the city takes full advantage of 3-day weekends, holidays, and different events, but this would be a year-round commitment to the local artists on In Street. I think it would be great for the small business community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve D'Annunzio?
Steve D'Annunzio, 13 Summer Street, Newburyport. Thank you for letting me speak. Speaking in regards to the artisan vendor's license on In Street as well, I've had an application in for a couple of years, but I'll speak in general terms that art is an important thing of any community, and certainly Newburyport has a ton of talented artists, but don't have the platform for which they can share their work, and I think the In Street area is a perfect place to extend some additional licenses and let that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ginny Arimo?
Hi, I'm Ginny Ramo. I live at 28R Toppins Lane in Newburyport. I'm here to speak to the parking garage, and the P&S agreement, I guess, is coming before the council tonight. And I certainly hope that goes to committee so that there's greater discussion. My concern at this juncture is the use of that garage. If the city's going to spend $2 million plus to purchase the land, and if this project ultimately costs $15 million, I have no idea because no numbers have really been provided to the residents, the city would be spending about $9 million, which, according to my very quick math today, puts every parking space at about $43,000 to $44,000 per space out of our own pocket. That's a lot of money. And if we're going to do that, if we decide that we're going to spend that kind of money, which is almost double what a typical garage would cost, I also want to be sure that this garage is supporting the downtown business community and that we're not renting spaces. We're not accommodating an entity like NED who can rent any portion of that garage, that it is made available to the public and the public only. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam Ketchum, 15 Washington Street. I also wanted to talk about the parking garage. At the May 17th joint meeting of the Planning Board and the Historical Commission, traffic and traffic studies were discussed at great length. The Phase 1 traffic study basically said there would be no effect, which is amazing. We were told, and it was also stated in the meeting documents, that the Phase 2 traffic study would be for future growth in the downtown area, such as the Ale House and Waterfront West. It was also not to include the Route 1 and the Merrimack Street intersection per the city. There was a great deal of pushback from the councilors who were present and residents and members of the boards. Apparently, this was the first time the councilors had heard that this extremely busy and dangerous intersection was not to be included in the study. I would like an assurance that this be included in any traffic study or decisions regarding the proposed garage. It is a hazard currently without the additional traffic that a garage would add. I'm also concerned about the P&S agreement and the price. I was told at the April 26th IAG meeting that the P&S was not complete at that time, but that part of the process was that NED had to sign off on a document stating we are selling it at below market price. Is this still the case, or are we in fact paying a premium? I think it's important that we continue to ask questions and get additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Germanaro.
Good evening, City Council President O'Brien, City Clerk Jones, members of the City Council. Rob Germanaro, 2 Ashland Street. I'd just like to help my friend Leslie out. She mentioned she was a member of the Waterfront Trust. She's actually a member of the NRA. So there you go, Leslie. On Lower Custom House Way, I've talked no less about it at about 15 meetings in the last 2.5 years. Councilor Eigenman has pointed out several times that a January 1926 land court decision proves, in fact, that the city owns that land. And that's almost 90 years ago. It's way past time to send a clear message to NED that we need to get those cars off that property. By far, it's one of our most historic structures in the downtown. An 1835 building that cars bang off all the time. And it's time to eliminate that. NED has had their way with us over here on this parking garage issue. They're asking for a major zoning change on Waterfront West, and it's way past time to send a clear message on that. Shifting gears to the ad hoc committee in the Central Open Waterfront, much like Lower Custom House Way, there's rights of ways that need to be protected in perpetuity. It is my personal opinion that the city should never own any of that land, and when the vote comes from the NRA, I think you're going to see that the city is not going to wind up owning any of that. Nobody disputes the fact that the Harbor Commission and the Harbor Master should control and run the docks in the water side, but when I hear that we need a parking revenue to fund a garage that may never be built as part of this process, it upsets me as a lifelong resident. There's parcels of land for bathrooms, as we all agree, there's never can be too many bathrooms. But in my personal opinion, this land needs to be turned over to the Waterfront Trust in perpetuity to form what I've been calling a super waterfront trust with either 7, 9, or 11 members. And that the city should certainly share in the revenue of the parking and the waterside leasing rights, but it should all come from the Waterfront Trust down. Elections may be won or lost this election cycle based on the decisions made in that regard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's it for public comment. Have the mayor's comment.
Thank you, President O'Brien. Good evening, President O'Brien, members of the City Council. It's been a while since we've had an update. Since last time I was before you, we were really talking about the FY18 budget. I'll try to go quickly. I know you have a heavy agenda tonight. Memorial Day yesterday, would like to thank our Veteran Services Officer, Kevin Hunt, once again organized a little memorial event to honor our veterans, and I thank the city councilors who were there, and despite the dreary weather, we had a wonderful turnout from the public, from public safety, and from our veterans. I also wanted to thank the councilors for the completion of all the budget workshops with the department heads over the last several weeks, and thank you for your due diligence. And certainly if you have additional questions or need additional supportive information before your review of the budget, which is anticipated on June 12th, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office. There's a picture of the Evergreen drilling there. Barry Miller has been on site mobilizing and installing at the Evergreen site. We're currently at 65 feet down and anticipate starting the pumping tomorrow, so I will keep you posted as that process begins to unfold. The wastewater treatment facility odor control process, as I had shared with you, doing construction, was awarded the general contract for $4.9 million, and pre-construction meeting is tomorrow. Holding a meeting designed for the abutters just because of the size of the conference space at the wastewater treatment facility on June 6th, which will be followed by a site walk. That's at 6:30 on site. Invitations are going out specifically to all the abutters. And I will provide additional updates on the construction meeting after the construction meeting tomorrow. I know that there was a request to have additional updates before the public hearing on the 6th, and that will be honored. We received 3 proposals on the 115 Water Street. The proposals were from Con Lab Headquarters, David Hall, and American Yacht Club. The decision after the review committee went through the proposals on Friday was that we needed further evaluation and negotiation by the review team, and additional information will be forthcoming on that process. Attached to your update is the active road and sidewalk schedule for this construction season. We anticipate beginning, weather permitting, later this week to start some pothole repairs, particularly on High Street. And line markings and crosswalks have been started during the evening process. On the other side, yellow lines have been completed, and there'll be more crosswalk work happening this week during the evening. In your update, you'll see a picture of the Plummer Springs Bridge. You'll see that this bridge is starting to show some deterioration. We brought BSC Engineering out to the site last week to complete an assessment, and we also have been in touch with the Mass Department of Transportation. We also sent an engineering team to assess. We are concerned about weight limits on this bridge, but at this point we are trying to keep the bridge open, maybe just restrict weight, tractor trailers, semis, etc. And I will keep you informed, and particularly the ward counselor, as we move forward on this project. The commuter rail summer closures, as you know, there was a meeting scheduled several weeks ago that was canceled, and the reason for that was that the MBTA had not worked through a lot of the options for commuters. But that meeting has been rescheduled upstairs at City Hall on June 8th at 6:30, and as you know, I've reported to you that these positive train controls are mandated by the federal government with significant daily fines if these are not included. But there are 2 closures on the weekends for the positive controls to be installed and for the swing bridge in Beverly. I encourage anyone interested in and who uses the commuter rail to please attend this meeting June 8th at 6:30 upstairs. On May 11th, we had the official opening, ribbon cutting of the Outer Master Transit Facility. It's a long time coming for this amenity for our voters. Unfortunately, I have to report that the sewer line let go on Sunday afternoon in the middle of Memorial Day. I'm just grateful it wasn't really, really hot and all voters didn't want to take showers. However, standard construction was on site today. Essentially, it came down to 2 inch going into a 1/2 inch with an adapter in the middle, and the adapter gave way. So that's all been corrected, and as I said, Castagne was on site this afternoon to correct that issue. Newburyport Public Schools, there has been a tremendous effort by a strong group of parents over the last several years under the Start School Later ad hoc group, who are interested in changing the start time of our schools to a later time based on all the scientific research that is out there. We asked the superintendent as school committee members to set up an ad hoc group to explore this a little bit further, because we felt that there were a lot of people who weren't brought into this discussion. The ad hoc group finished their work, and you'll notice attached to your packet is their recommendations that will be presented to the school committee on June 5th. And we anticipate a follow-up work over the course of the year to see how we can implement these regulations to change our start time of school. There also is House Bill 3480, which has been presented by Start School Later Massachusetts with 5,000 signatures, asking the legislature to begin to take a look at this issue also. I had mentioned to you at my last update, I believe, that I was going to the Mass School Building Authority to close out the final audit of the Knock-Moline School, and that did happen, and there is a balance of $9,083.857. We would like to use $450,000 of that dollar as opposed to pulling it out of the capital to do the Knox School parking lot, which makes sense since it was part of that project, and to upgrade the lighting there. We recently found out that we were not approved for the MSBA accelerated repair program we had put in for the leaks that we have at the high school roof. Unfortunately, we were not accepted, but we are looking at possibly pulling $20,000 out of that fund also to be able to do some patchwork and reapply in the next cycle. More will be coming about that. And the transfer request should be before you on June 12th. Graduation is Sunday, June 4th at 11 o'clock, weather permitting. And we held also, as you know, we have been working also with the Waterfront Trust, the settlers, the NRA on implementing sort of a checklist and guideline from the ad hoc committee. We met twice last week for several hours, and we are finding that we have a lot more consensus than we had initially anticipated. Land conveyance still continues to be an issue of discussion. We are meeting again on June 15th. And I, as many have said tonight, would thank those of the council, the ad hoc committee, Councilor Eigenman and Z for their work that has brought us to this point. Last week this is not in your packet, and it wasn't, I forgot, but I will put it in when it gets posted on the blog. We had a meeting at Merrimack Valley Planning Commission. The mayors and managers, we meet usually once a month, and the issue of clean rivers was brought up. And the mayors and managers want to do a regional RFP. They're very concerned about procurement law, and they're very concerned about the scope of service. So I know we voted to, once we got a memorandum of agreement, that we would be willing to move forward, but I would suggest that we might want to step back and work with all the regional river communities and do a joint RFP with them. So something to think about. Brown School adaptive use RFPs have been received. We're just putting together the review committee, so there has been no action on that yet. I'm also happy to report to all the hockey lovers in the greater Newburyport area that the Department of Conservation Resources, DCR, which owns the Graft Rink, and there has been lots of concerns and issues brought to all of us over the years about the operation of that facility. They have entered into a new contract with Bob Rolando, who currently operates DCR rinks in Lowell and Everett, and Paul O'Brien and I walked through the site last week, and I'm very pleased with the plans that have been put in place to upgrade the facility. We had several events over the last several weeks. The Greater Newburyport Media Communication Foundation, Center, formerly known as PortMedia, had the ribbon cutting at the new site next to the Senior Center. We also dedicated and cut the ribbon for the Richie Eaton baseball field on May 18th. Congressman Seth Moulton was here, and had almost a sellout town hall forum at Knock-Moline. And then this past week, of course, the Adventure and Alabama, 2 scooters, 1920 scooters, tall ships came in and had a wonderful event for the city. I know Councilor Cronin was on the Alabama, and I sailed in on we actually motored in on the Adventure, 5-hour freezing ride, but it was a nice event. Upcoming event is this Saturday, or coming up June 3rd, is the ribbon cutting at the church steeple, and I know all the city councilors were invited to that also. So I'd like to invite Ann Hauser and moms who've been active in Town Sense in America to come forward and stand with me as I read the proclamation. Thank you for being here tonight. I think most of you know that I am a member of the Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and these are a group of concerned citizens who also are very concerned about illegal guns. And June 2nd is a day that we, National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and I'd like to read a proclamation. Whereas every day, 93 Americans are killed by gun violence. More than 200 have sustained non-fatal firearm injuries over the last 5 years. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to be killed with guns than people in other developed countries. And whereas the Office of the Mayor and the Police Department consider the protection of public safety their highest responsibility. And whereas in honoring those who have lost their lives to gun violence, residents are asked to wear orange on June 2nd to help raise awareness about gun violence. And whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership. Now therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Donna D. Holliday, Mayor, hereby declare June 2nd, 2017 as National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the city of Newburyport. Be it further proclaimed that the city of Newburyport honor and remember all victims and survivors of gun violence, and do declare that we as a country resolve to work towards a resolution and reducing this violence. Given under my hand and seal this day, Donna D. Holliday. So please wear orange, and I know you have ribbons that this team has given to you. Please wear orange on June 2nd, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Quick question.
Any questions?
Thank you. Can you, how many proposals came in for the Brown School?
3.
3? Thank you.
Mayor, could you just refresh us on the anticipated cost of replacing the entire roof of the high school and patches that are at least leaking at this point that the SBA has not responded to?
They're anticipating that we could probably patch and do some flashing work for about $20,000.
That's the patching,
But
for the
for the
project.
whole roof, the estimate has been as high as $850.
Yeah.
And that's why it would have been nice to get a 50-50 split here with them helping us pay for it. So I think this is a good approach.
Madam Mayor, the Waterfront Trust NRA City meetings, the 2 meetings that were held, is this being done in connection with the ad hoc committee that we had, or is there something being done to incorporate or build off of the work of that ad hoc committee?
That's exactly right. In December, when the ad hoc committees gave a list, they handed it over to the city and said, take it from here and get the trust docs rewritten. So we decided that at our first meeting that it made sense to talk about where we have consensus as opposed to sitting down and trying to go through docs at this point. So we're trying to build the areas that we have consensus, and then once that's determined, then back into rewriting the trust docs.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to the consent agenda.
The agenda this evening consists of the approval of the minutes for May 8, 2017. The number of transfers, first transfer number 29, elections and registration account $1,000, the clerk administrative account, same amount, $1,000, to go to budget and finance. All of these transfers are scheduled to go to budget and finance. Transfer 30, solid waste, $24,700, to household hazardous waste, $12,000, and recycle manager, $12,000. Transfer 31, library staff, $10,000, to library maintenance equipment, same amount. Transfer 32, free cash, $233,000, to snow and ice, $41,000, and snow and ice expenses, $192,000. Transfer 33, free cash, $25,000, to city solicitor, same amount. Transfer 34, free cash, $70,000, to fire overtime, same amount. There are a number of communications. First communication 59, port taxi memoranda, suspension of taxi permits from the Newburyport Police to license and permits. Communication 60, block party, Pheasant Run Drive, June 30th, 2017, to go to public safety. Communication 61, Pan Merrimack Challenge Ride, 6/17/2017. That's a change. Instead of public safety to be received and filed at the request of Councilor Connell. Communication 62, Lions Club Yankee Homecoming Road Race, 8/1/2017, public safety. Communication 63, Slow Bike Race, 8/2/2017, public safety. Communication 64, city clerk contract, 3 years, budget and finance. Communication 65, letter from Kyle Hodson, Director of Athletics at the high school, receive and file. Communication 66, amendment to funding contribution, Article 5, General Government and Committee of the Whole. There are a number of appointments. First reading. Reappointments. Appointment 35, Karen B. Weiner, 7 Lincoln Street, Affordable Housing Trust, 6/1/2018. Appointment 36, Dan Bordeaux, 376 High Street, Conservation Commission, 6/1/2020. Appointment 37, Doug Muir, 12 Hancock Street, Conservation Commission, 5/1/2020. 38, Brian Brunel, 83 Garden Street, Constable Civil Business, 7/1/2021. Appointment 39, Miller Graff, 2 Rossignol Road, Council on Aging, 5/31/2022. Appointment 40, Leslie Eckhold, 36 Warren Street, Fruit Street Local, Historic District, 5/1/2020. Appointment 41, Karen Popkin, 49 Boardman Street, Parks Commission, 5/1/2018. Appointment 42, Brendan Coffey, 7 Park Street, Water Sewer Commission until 5/1/2020. Appointment 43, Edmund L. Kelly, 23 Dorothy Lucy Drive, Water Sewer Commission, 5/1/2020. And that is the consent agenda as it consists this evening.
Motion to approve.
One item is, which was changed to receive and file? Which item?
That's the Pan Merrimack Challenge
Communication
Ride.
61. Councilor Rose? Something else to come out? I'd like to pull out Communication 59 out of the consent agenda, please.
Second. Mr. President? Could we pull the minutes? I've got one correction. Second to that as well.
Anything else? What was Greg's? Take the motion as amended.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We're going to the regular agenda. We'll take the minutes.
Yes, Mr. President, just on page 4 of the minutes, under public safety, I had a order number 19 about stop signs at Temple and Fair. We were about to vote on that, and the TSAC, the Transportation Safety Advisory Committee, hadn't met yet, so we decided we would hold on that one until we heard from them. So actually, it did not get the full vote. We voted unanimously to take it out, and then we put it back. That's all. It was referred back, yeah.
Anything else on the minutes?
Nope.
Okay. We'll take a motion on the mayor's update.
Motion to receive and file.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll take Communication 56.
Motion to take off the table. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Off the table, go ahead.
We also make a motion to take Communication 67 at the same time, Mr. President, the related item.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to start to amend to replace the original communication with the new updated one, 67, please, in its
Do we have a
entirety.
motion to approve first? Before we discuss the amendments, we need a motion to approve the original, I think, don't we?
Okay.
In its entirety.
Well, we had a motion to approve when we tabled, but I'll do another one, so a motion to approve. Second.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, a motion to make an amendment to replace the original as it's tabled with the new version 67. So replace 56 with 67.
Second. Any discussion on that? Is that the two-page one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, was there a second on that?
It was, yes. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Zeke.
So I'd like to just speak for a few moments, if I may. First of all, just a recap of where we've been. So the ad hoc was formed by the City Council President and has met for approximately 2 years trying to
get to the bottom of this waterfront, might be the easiest way to say it. The production or the output of that committee about 3 weeks ago, actually, we had an extra week off, was what you see in communication number 56. There were some concerns about that I personally heard about and wanted to make an effort on, to try and close those gaps as best I could. And communication 67 really represents my efforts to do so. So what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about Communication 67, what's different, what's the same, and really what this whole thing means, if I could ask for the indulgence of my colleagues. So what's different? Let's just go through the basics. The primary changes are as follows. Number one is the Merrimack Street parcel, which was slated in the previous version to go to the city, has been removed from that and sent to the Waterfront Trust. And basically what that means is every square inch of land, dry land, so I can distinguish them properly, goes to the city, except for 2 items. One is the firehouse patio, which would come to the city for lease to...
No, it goes to the trust.
Goes to the trust.
Goes to the trust.
Excuse me, goes to the trust. And the custom house property, which would come to the city for ultimately for a 99-year lease to the custom house for its use. So there's some consistency there. That's one big change in terms of the land. The second big change is the finance portion of this has essentially been rewritten. The previous model and theory was that we would have some sort of a guarantee, was the idea, and we did a lot of work in that committee to try and define that guarantee, both in terms of its scope and how it would be enforced and what could happen if it didn't come to fruition and so forth. I think I perceived a lot of unhappiness with that, would be the easiest way. There was a desire for direct and diverse revenues. So the rewrite is basically drawn up specifically to address that. And basically what you have before you is a fairly straightforward plan for direct and diverse revenues, and I'll tell you what some of them are. First of all, generating money on land really is going to be through parking, and so what we have in this proposal is basically the east and the west lots. Those are land are going to the Waterfront Trust. The revenue would be shared between the city and the trust, and the percentage share would actually change over time as the park grows. So you can kind of look at that in a sense as a way to also incentivize building of the park. One important thing was to try not to build in disincentives or reasons to keep parking forever. I think that was a common concern. So we have monies being driven on land. Second would be monies driven on water. So the trust, of course, owns the embayment today and draws revenues from that. That would continue. But in addition, the actual upriver portions of the submerged lands, which are basically the public excursion boating vessels, would formally, in terms of ownership, go to the trust. And the money that's generated from there would go directly to the trust. So the control really wouldn't change. The trust controls that today. The revenues really wouldn't change. They already get that today. But what would change would be the ownership. So you've got some money being generated on water. Then you have, on top of that, in terms of water, there's been a lot of discussion about the future of the water and the hopes that maybe the water side is going to grow and that maybe it has to grow in order to support the trust as maybe potentially parking shrinks and everybody drives a self-driving smart car, so we don't need as much parking. Of course, nobody can tell the future. So there's also the potential in this proposal for the ability to share in future growth on the water side, and in fact, maybe even very heavily weighted towards the organization, whether that's the city or the trust, that actually pushes hard and in a sense sort of makes that happen. So you've got a lot of diversity in terms of source, land, and water. You also have a diversity in types of revenue. So basically you have some revenues that are fixed. Riverside Park is a good example of that. It's a fixed cost regardless of what happens there. As of today, the city, for example, pays $70,000 for the use of that lot. You also have diversity because you have variable money, which is the parking. So parking goes up, parking goes down. Generally, it's been up, but it can go either way. So you've got variability in there and diversification there. So those are some of the highlights of the finances, but now that I've talked about that, I just want to take a step back for a moment and just opine for a minute. For all the hours I've spent on this, I think I can do that for maybe a minute or two. It's very easy, I think, to lose sight of this whole thing. We're trying to get an open waterfront. I think there is actually consensus about that. I don't think that was always the case. I'm the relative newcomer here, and as I've said, I think you have to live in Newburyport for a lot longer to be considered an old salt. I am not one, but I do know that that is something that seems to be something that everybody wants. So before we get too far into the weeds, let's just envision what happens the day after this plan is executed. All the land goes into the trust. That means it's protected. That was one of the biggest things for a lot of the parties. A lot of the folks have been talking about this for a very long time. That's number one. Number two is the trust going to be well-funded for its operations both now and in the future? In my opinion, this plan delivers that. Okay, I'm a little bit biased, perhaps, but if you just look at the facts, if you look at the numbers, I have done the math, both on the water side revenues and on the parking revenues, and done my own sort of projections for where I think, and I've shared those with folks who have asked me. You will have a well-funded trust, so that's number two. Number three, independence of the trust was a very important thing. A lot of folks talked about, okay, we don't want to have money with strings attached, is what I was told, and that was one of the things that came out of the previous ad hoc document. A lot of these revenues I just mentioned, they are checks written directly to the trust. There is no attachment to them in terms of you must do this in order to get the money or leaving any sort of gray area there. And fourth, we have a lot of what I would consider gray area things, which maybe sometimes Newburyport's famous for, where things happen over time, they evolve naturally, and a process gets into place. This would codify all of those things, and I think one of the public speakers tonight mentioned the ways to the water. Those are specifically called out in the document as well to be settled once and for all. They are documented to be perpendicular in this plan. So that's an overview from a much higher level. I mean, I think it's a very positive thing. I think it's something we should all be proud of. And the last thing I would like to say is, as folks know, we've said it several times, our vote tonight, if we do ultimately vote on this, does not mean everybody wakes up tomorrow and has to do what we say. But I think this document deserves a hearing on its own, without any more meetings. With all due respect to the mayor and the administration, this is the work product of several city councilors that sat on the ad hoc committee, which included all of the parties, and hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of discussion and thoughts and balancing. With all due respect to everybody, I haven't heard any new ideas in the past few months. The same ideas come up, which is fine, but now it's time to understand where's the compromise point going to be. I submit that this document's a very fair compromise for all parties, and I think it would be a very positive step forward. I also think that we have a vote coming up in 2 weeks on a different but related matter, and I'll leave your minds to think about what that might be. It's a big one, and I don't. There's separation, but there's also connection between those issues, and again, enough time has gone into us that I think it deserves, on its own merits, to stand up and be looked at and voted on publicly so that we can understand once and for all maybe where the parties at least stand on this document. Thank you.
Anyone else? Else argument?
Thank you, Mr. President. I also would like to get a vote tonight. I think it's time. So we introduced the report of May 2nd about 3 weeks ago. Everyone's had time to think about it. More than that, Councilor Zeid went back to the stakeholders and came up with an alternative. I mean, it really is another way to do it. What I really hope we can do tonight is get a unanimous vote by this council to set policy. And although Councilor Zeid's approach was not where we ended up at the committee, I'm going to go for it because it gets to a settlement. And I want to explain why you have to have a settlement. My belief, and people can disagree, but good luck to you, is that litigation is not the way to resolve where we've been. The litigation is just, well, let's duke it out in court, and I believe from everyone I've talked to, it's the Waterfront Trust or the settlers or the city council or the mayor or COW, no one party can compel the other parties to bend to its will. And what I'm going to speak about tonight is what I think is the city's role in this. That's to say, the city is represented by its elected representatives, the city council and the mayor. We are relevant. So what I want to implore the council to do is to adopt these policies and go no farther, because a settlement that is not approved by the city council is a practical and I think a legal impossibility. It's not going to happen. If the NRA said, nuts to you, city council, we're going to do whatever we want and we're going to decide our deal, I will explain why I don't think that really has legs, and that's not in anyone's interest. The whole purpose was to negotiate a settlement that all parties, including the city, would agree to. All right. You have to go back to this color picture, which is, you have a black and white. It's a very big piece of land. In 1968, it was covered with dilapidated industrial buildings. Okay? The land was acquired with public money, most of it federal, but it was applied for and granted to the NRA, the Redevelopment Authority. So who are they? The NRA was created by the people of Newburyport, acting through its city council, pursuant to state law. But it was not foisted on the city of Newburyport. They chose to have a Newburyport Redevelopment Authority. They also adopted an urban renewal plan. Who adopted it? The city council adopted it. That's what ultimately led to rehabilitation of downtown. Originally, it was tear down everything and build a Zaire. They moved along, they evolved. That always involved the city council, the elected legislature of this city. In the 70s, it appeared that the council and the mayor had lost its way as to the central waterfront. I'm not talking about State Street. They had come around on that. My understanding is the litigation grew out of a belief by interested parties, known as the public settlers today, including people that are still around, sitting in this room, that the city had lost its way and that they were going to give away all of the central waterfront and extinguish all the public ways to the water. And they said, that's wrong, you're not doing the job, you got to protect the public, and so they sued. And we owe them a debt for doing that, because they protected the public's rights when the city council at the time, I guess, was not willing to do that. But they got a partial victory in court. It was not a complete victory in litigation. That's important. The court ruled that some of the alleged ways of the water actually did not exist as they were claimed. Riverside Park, which you've already heard about tonight, the appellate court ruled that it was no longer a park at all. The parties went into negotiation, and that's where I'm trying to get us. Because the parties all got something more from the negotiation. They stipulated in land court to a series of items. It's recorded down in Salem. You can read it yourself, and others, including former city solicitor Richard Jones, can correct me if I'm misstating what it says. But again, the parties got more. It was rational for them to enter a settlement, just as it is for us to unanimously endorse a settlement tonight, because all parties will get more than they can get by suing each other. The city agreed to recognize Riverside Park. They didn't have to do that, but they did. And the quid pro quo is that public parking was allowed there. That's in the stipulation. The Waterfront Trust took direct control of some of this land, the promenade, the Market Landing Park, on, but not all of the land. And they're required to hold it in public trust forever and to provide public free access to those lands forever. But that's the city's role. The land didn't go directly to the Waterfront Trust under the stipulation. The NRA conveyed the land to the city, and the city then gave it to the Waterfront Trust on all of these conditions. Moreover, the stipulation said the Waterfront Trust cannot divest itself of its interest in these lands. Can't give away its interest in these lands, except to one party and for one reason. Guess who? The city, for public use. That's what the court said. In the current trust documents, I only have the ones from the 1990s, somehow that got dropped. But at least the courts signed on in that stipulation by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts thought giving land to the city for a public use, well, that's fine. Obviously, 1980 was not the end of the controversy. The fate of the remaining land had to be debated, had to be determined. But remember, the assumption with stipulation was it was going to be developed. With that in mind, the stipulation 1980 actually reserves to the NRA the right to build pedestrian crosswalks in the air at least 10 feet over all of the public ways and the park. That's an existing right of the NRA. Now, nobody's proposing that now because it's ridiculous. And that's why you have to listen to what Councilor Zita is saying is you're getting an open waterfront and things are being given up, including those cockamamie air rights. That was the deal. All right, so then we get to the early 80s. more flexibility had to be put in. The central firehouse had been closed, I think, since 1978. We had to figure out a way to adaptively reuse that building, which I believe is the oldest city-owned building, even older than the Custom House, which is owned by the NRA. So what did they do? The trustees of the Waterfront Trust and the settlers who had a say in it were creative, and they figured out a way to allow a patio in the back and some other changes to be used, because that revenue is necessary for the firehouse to be solvent. For decades, the firehouse was not solvent. They now seem to have got it right. Why? Because they have a restaurant, they have a commercial use. There was creativity, there was flexibility, there was an understanding of the greater public good, not fighting over every square inch of dirt. In 2003, the city adopted its waterfront strategic plan, and all that did was elaborate on the 2001 plan. So the basic plan for the central waterfront has been set since 2001. What did it say? 3 sentences, all you need. And we used these 3 sentences at our first meeting of the ad hoc. They read, 1, planning for the central waterfront and undertaken in 2001 came to the conclusion that this area should remain open with a balance of passive green spaces and surface parking lots of sufficient size to meet demand. Okay? Next sentence. Forming a developed and active edge along either side of the park will help to support the extensive open space that is recommended. 3, the costs and benefits of a public parking garage is, under consideration at this time. Those are the 3 items. So at the ad hoc in our first couple of meetings, we said, all right, how do we feel about an open waterfront with a balance of, okay, we're fine with that. Everyone agrees. Next, what does it mean to develop an active edge? Well, we had just gotten through the NRA's Union Studios plan. Their interpretation was private development perpendicular to the river on either side of the current Market Landing Park. We on the committee, as early as our first meeting, or second meeting, said, well, that idea is stone dead. No chance. Instead, we figured out, okay, how are we going to operate and maintain a park without private development? The only edge that ever came up was a possible public building on the pop-up park, which in this color drawing is the white area at the extreme southwest corner. That's it. The idea is that the public restrooms, which are called temporary, but now I believe have been up for 20 years, need to be replaced. So you got to put them somewhere. You could build a new building next door and stick them in there. Finally, by the time we started meeting in 2015, we knew about the Titcomb and Merrimack Street garage. So we said, hey, not only is it under consideration, there's light at the end of the tunnel. If we were to take some parking spaces off the waterfront, we actually have a way to replace them. All right, that's where the May 2nd report came from. 2 of the 5 councilors wanted to get rid of that building possibility on the pop-up park. They were voted down 3-2, but all of us said, all right, we're going to vote this out to the full council so the council can take a formal position on how to end this thing, a settlement for everybody that the city would accept. So we did that. Okay, then over the past month you heard from Councilor Zeid. He responded to the objections. The objections were method of funding the park operations, having the harbor master control all waterside operations, being the money too, and the city owning any land on the central waterfront, even for a public building. Okay, so he has these alternative ideas. He's told you the main differences of them. I've studied them. I think we should endorse them so we can take a position that will make a settlement possible. But it is a package deal. We heard some testimony during public comment that I could never accept, and I don't think we should either. I don't want to pick at Councilor Zeid's proposal. It's a package. First, if the Waterfront Trust is going to directly control most of the revenues from parking and boating, which was not the May 2nd plan, it's a different model, then it cannot also expect the city, taxpayers, to be on the hook for cost overruns. That's not fair. That's not right. It's one or the other. We had a model where we guaranteed the funding for a park for all time. They were uncomfortable with that, and that's fine. That means you have your own individual funding mechanisms, and you got to make it work. Also, if this is going to be the final settlement, we're trying to figure out a way to configure this board of trustees so that we don't have fights every year over what they're doing or what they can or cannot do. If we're going to go through the brain damage of rewriting their trust documents, You have to make it so that the NRA and the public settlers, the litigators that have been in on this for 45 years, don't need a role anymore. It's time to let the Waterfront Trust leave the nest and fly on its own. Without those two things, I don't think we should approve any deal. And I'm perfectly happy to fight it out the hard way. The litigation started in the 70s, I thought, because elected officials weren't doing their job. They were giving away public access to the river. And it took litigation to point out to the city that that was wrong and contrary to state law. Well, there's no prospect of private development anymore. That's gone. We cannot agree to a system where the people of Newburyport, who we represent, are beholden to a private charity over which they have no control. We need that control. We need that oversight. It's not about funding a parking garage, which we haven't voted on yet. It's not about paying the bonds on the harbor master. It's about protecting the interest of the public. Remember, just as there are procurement laws, which are now coming home to roost on cleaning up the Merrimack River, we can't just give money to worthy causes without protections. There is a section of the Massachusetts Constitution called the Anti-Aid Amendment. And very shortly it says, you cannot take public money or property and give it to a charitable organization which is, quote, not publicly owned and under the exclusive control, order, and supervision of public officers or public agents authorized by the Commonwealth or federal authority or both. That's been litigated in the context of redevelopment agencies in the city of Lawrence. Now, in that case, they found that it was okay that land was given to Emerson College, I believe, because fair value was given in return. So what I'm saying is, it is not in the interest of the NRA, the Waterfront Trust, COW, the settlers, anybody, to simply stiff the city and give them nothing. To say, we're going to take all the land and we get to run the park the way we want, and you pay all the bills. That is not lawful. But more importantly, it's not fair. It's not right. Could never support that. The compromise that Councilor Zede has come up with is as far as I think we should go, and it's very, very far. No other park in this city gets this kind of treatment. Not even close. So I hope that we can get behind that unanimously. Otherwise, I am confident that the state legislature, which is the ultimate arbiter of the public trust on tidelands, and our courts will understand that the people of Massachusetts, which the land is held in trust for, not the members of the Waterfront Trust, the people of Massachusetts, they consented to be governed by elected representatives. And it doesn't matter how well-intentioned or righteous any charity is, they have to answer to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Cohen?
Thank you.
I'm certainly not going to try to repeat one thing that Councilor Eigenman just said, or the document that Councilor Zede put together. But there is a common denominator between the two of these that is very, very important to keep in the front of our minds. And that there are people in this room, be them NRA members, COW members, settlers, or Waterfront Trust members. There are people throughout Newburyport that want this, want an open waterfront, and do not have the time nor inclination to delve into this as some of these folks have for 40 some odd years. It's quite simple. People in Newburyport want this done. They want this, and I don't want to say settled as in settle law. They want this finished. They want this accomplished so we can move on. What Councilor Zede has put together, and we've chatted several times about this, is probably our last best effort. and I said this at the last ad hoc meeting, and I'll say it again now. We are at the goal line here. After all these years, there's any metaphor you want. There's light at the end of the tunnel. The train's coming into the station. This is it. And what my biggest fear is if this falls apart right now, my granddaughter, who's 6, is going to be parking on dirt parking lots when she's 46. And that's just not right. Let us get this done, please.
Anyone else? Councilor Earls?
That being said, I'm happy with this, except for 2A, where I'd like the term staggered, very simply just staggered, where we don't have a complete turnover, and that's not mentioned in here, that we're recommending staggered terms. So if we could just add somehow that, I don't want to get into the sort of nitty-gritty, but maybe we have to right now, that it's not a complete turnover the way it would be written right now.
Do you agree with that? Do you have any questions on that?
It's my understanding that the Waterfront Trust is already on staggered terms, but if it adds comfort to explicitly say it, I don't have any, I mean, it's status quo essentially, so maybe I think we should get into the language just so we can complete it. So Board of Trustees increases to 7, consistent with current staggered terms. Would that be an acceptable addition to make it explicitly clear?
I'll make that
If so,
motion.
that's a friendly amendment for me.
The second on that?
Second.
Approved? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Yes, but I don't know who's the right person to answer this, but I'm trying to understand the patio. That's part of the revenue stream that supports the Firehouse Center, the FDH. Depends on that revenue. Who is going to own that, number one? And I understand from this, and maybe I misunderstand it, so you can correct me, that it's going to the trust. Is that part of your proposal, or did I mishear that?
So yeah, let me just make it clear. It's executive summary, bullet number 1. NRA grants all parcels of land in Waterfront Trust for public park and waterside uses except 1, firehouse patio, which goes to the city, which immediately gets leased to the firehouse, probably in a 99-year lease, and except for the custom house land, which the city accepts and leases directly. So actually, what you're getting is homogenization between those two. Basically, they're both going to operate similarly. They're not going to own the land they're on, but they're going to have a very long-term lease and control over their lands. And by the way, if I could just opine on the Firehouse Center for a moment, that was debated several times, but at the request of some of the parties, actually, it seemed to be a positive, actually, for it to come to the city, because negotiating that lease between a nonprofit has turned into a bit of a challenge. So this way, the city can probably just do a 99-year lease and dispense with that nonsense every few years that's unnecessary.
That answers my question.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Vogel?
Thank you, Mr. President. To the author, if I may, how about the lawn behind the Custom House? Where does that fall?
The lawn, that would come to the city and be leased back to the Custom House. There was some discussion and debate about whether you go from the Custom House all the way back to the bulkhead. My sense is, I mean, that was a detail that was, that specific detail about whether you go all the way back to the bulkhead or not was purposefully left out because A, the boardwalk may actually not be desirable for the Custom House to have in their lease, and neither will because that could be a very expensive thing to have included in your lease. But I think, just to be clear, explicit, the lawn, there's no question about it. That's this, especially, and then back behind there, I mean, that's a, this is a high-level document. That's a detail that the parties can work out if they want to have it back to the bulkhead or not. Does that answer your question?
Aside from the fact that it's not explicit.
Okay. Well, if I may.
Please.
Actually it is. That's a commonality between both the May 2nd and the amendment now before us. So if you look on the second page of either one, under 4B boy, Roman numeral 3. So it goes to the bulkhead.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, if I may. Thank you, Mr. President. To the Councilor from Ward 2, you mentioned you threw out the concept of public restroom or rebuilding of the restroom, and then you said something that wasn't agreed to, or there was discussion on that. Where does that all fall in here, if you will?
Yes, so that's one of the differences between the May 2nd report, and again, we had a split vote below. It was 3-2 in favor of allowing the city to take title to the area which is now covered by the pop-up park. I guesstimated at one point it's about 10,000 square feet. I actually got on GIS, it's about 7,000 square feet. It's a 7,000 square foot area. The idea would be that there would be a deed restriction held by the Waterfront Trust such that any building that went there had to include public restrooms, because the whole point is we're trying to figure out a way to get a building built and replace the other ones. If you built it next door, you could wait until it's done and then you could rip out the old ones and move on. But that has proven controversial, and so Councilor Zeid's proposal just gets rid of that. So that piece of land, the pop-up park, would also go to the Waterfront Trust with no mention of a future building. Now, that said, I think that the bathrooms are an accepted under Massachusetts law accessory use to a park. So you probably could figure out a way when those things finally fail that we may come back to it. But the point is, it's not part of the deal now. It's to be determined.
But it's not necessarily dead.
It's not precluded, but it's dead as part of the deal. It's not part of the deal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Cameron, do you have something?
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay. Carl, go.
Yes, there's reference here, and I don't know, I'm going to direct this to Councilor Eigenman, to $1 million endowment established for the purposes of maintaining the park. As I understand it, I may not understand completely, $500,000 from the trust and $500,000 from the NRA. Is that the understanding? Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah. Again, this is a difference. I don't blame the councilor for being confused. So part of the ways, the original report of May 2nd said the city will guarantee, we would get special legislation from Beacon Hill to guarantee the city must pay, and we wanted to make sure that that had belt and suspenders. So we came up with the idea of an endowment fund that you cannot spend the principal, but it would spill off income to supplement overruns, say, on maintenance. Right, and we knew at the time, you know, counting on our fingers and from testimony at the committee, the Waterfront Trust has roughly $250,000 on hand. The NRA has roughly $250,000 on hand. Now, of course, there are improvements that they want to make. That was going to come to $500,000. So in the original proposal, we actually thought that the original endowment would only be $500,000. That's it. In Councilor Zeid's proposal, I'm just reading it just to save time, he's the author, it's $350,000. You can elaborate as necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for the change in the number was A, just from a global scheme, was the change in the model, the whole model for the finances. So I think in the first ad hoc document, there was also maybe talk of the city putting money into that endowment. But in the current model where we're going more direct, the 350 is basically a rough estimation based on how much the trust has in its coffers, minus what sort of they've already committed to. They actually have projects that are in process now and some other ones that are going. And then the NRA does have, as Councilor Eigenman mentioned, have a substantial sum in its coffers that it needs to spend some too. So that was scaled back. But I didn't want to get rid of it because I like the idea of an endowment where the principal can't be spent. And you know, I think fundraising has been mentioned here and other discussions. Now the fundraising could be used in two ways. One could be to feed the endowment over time, or the other could be to raise money to make the actual capital, you know, to actually do the work and build the park out. So I think it'd be a nice thing, and if the principal can't be spent, as we discuss in other contexts, rates will probably rise over time, and actually it would throw off decent income that, again, goes to the longevity of the trust. So that's the reason for the change in the amount and the reason for having it at all.
Councilor Dudley.
I rise in support of this. We've had two very capable counselors take the lead on this and do a tremendous amount of work and study. Some faith has got to be accorded to them. We need a starting or an ending point for us. It's not the end, I think, of this discussion, but we certainly need something, agree with a unanimous proposal to put forth and put into the ring. From my view, everybody's about 95% of the way there. Again, I have not, I'm certainly not an old salt here as well, but for the time that I've been living here and coming to Newburyport, this has been an issue. And I respect the passion of settlers and waterfront trusts and even NRA people. But we've got to, from the city perspective, we have to put something forward. I actually had stated that I was not married to the idea of the city owning the pop-up park, and that if that was a catalyst to getting the others to agree, then that's something that we could forfeit and move this along, because I agree with Councilor Cronin that what the people out there watching us right now really understand is they want an open waterfront, and we're getting an open waterfront, and that is going to, a lot of things, if there's some things out there remaining, we need to present a unified approach so that those remaining details can be worked out amongst the parties. I do have one question though of the Ward 1 councillor. It sounds like you went and presented to the interested stakeholders the idea of giving up the pop-up park as city property. What was their reaction, and can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Just to be clear, I mean, it's not a formal presentation. I've just been reaching out to anybody who would like to speak to me. I think that the reaction has been positive, was what I took away from it. I think there was concern on several of the different boards with, frankly, any land going to the city and what the future may hold. Councilor Eigenman spoke a little bit about some of our efforts in the ad hoc. In the original proposal, we had put on some restrictions that any building, if it were to be built on that property, would have to have public restrooms, but it was clear that that wasn't enough. That wasn't going to get it done. So here, this gets rid of it. I think there's no question those bathrooms are going to have to be replaced, and they can be replaced in their current location if the trust so decides. I mean, to me, at the end of the day, the land ownership is the biggest question. And so that is completely resolved here. And then, as far as future needs, it takes a village. So everybody will have to be involved in that discussion, and trustees will have to do what they can to provide for the park. And if that means replacing the bathrooms in place, then that's what will have to happen. So generally positive would be the answer.
I am going to vote in favor of this. I think, aside from preserving the waterfront as being open, my interest is in removing as much of the parking as is possible on the waterfront. I like the incentive system that was added here. And let me just, excuse myself for going on just a little bit on this. This city and what the city looks like today is largely a function of opposition to a concept of urban renewal that dominated in this country in the 50s and the 60s. And that concept of urban renewal was to design places to be convenient for the automobile. And it was always abhorrent, all right, that the one place, our waterfront, all right, was being used for the convenience of automobiles, right? And sort of stepped on the image that we have of a city that has, as much as possible, preserved a 19th century character, 18th and 19th century character of the city. So I think this agreement, and I want to thank Councilor Zede and Councilor Eigenman and the other councilors on the ad hoc committee. I was not on the ad hoc committee, for all the time and the effort that they have put into this, because I think this does offer a way where finally, after 40 years, we can do it. I'm a little concerned about that. I don't have the details on the finances, and so the question is to whether or not the Waterfront Trust will have sufficient revenue to maintain that property. I have the same concern, by the way, for the other 22 parks in the city, right? Whether we have sufficient money to maintain them, but I am concerned. On the other hand, I'm also, because of the lack of specificity, a little concerned about the harbor
the Harbor Commission, whether they have sufficient funds, and whether we have sufficient funds to, yes, do the parking garage, the intermodal facility, because that is a sine qua non, without which, that is, we do not have parking removed from the waterfront. So, but I'm willing to, and Councilor Z, you mentioned that you had crunched the numbers, and I have confidence, and actually I don't think it needs to be specified, so I will vote yes.
Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to speak strongly in favor of both or either of these. I think one of the problems, and I have not been here 40 years either, is that there's kind of a thought that there's one path, one final destination to an open waterfront. And I think as we've learned, at least I've learned over the last 10 years, I think there's many permutations of this that will be a good move for the city in the long run. Like Councilor Tontar, and I don't expect an answer to this, and I don't need one in order to vote yes on either of these. I did like what I'll call the cleanliness of Councilor Eigenman's model in terms of the funding, in that the city would be legally responsible and bind itself to fund the operation and maintenance of an expanded park. Like Councilor Tontar, I'm not sure, and I do have absolute faith in Councilor Zeid's number crunching abilities and kind of thinking long term. I'm not sure. This, to me, this funding model is something that could have come out of lawyers and accountants working together to kind of finalize this. I am sure that this will need to get crunched again. I'm just, where it's so specific, the Waterfront Trust may end up with not enough money, or it may end up with too much money. And to me, the city guaranteeing the operations and maintenance, in the city drawing from a larger pool, predominantly of parking money or other monies it could use, I think was a cleaner, more robust kind of backup to the funding. But I'll suspend my concerns and certainly vote for the amendment. And my understanding, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, we're proposing this as a settlement. There is still negotiation between the parties that needs to happen. Just to take a step back, this is kind of what we think is something that makes sense. So when eventually something does come back to us to vote on, we'll have been on the record as expecting something that will at least look either similar to this or in the same spirit, where there's compromise on all sides and we can get to what we want, because the council will definitely need to take further votes on this down the road, and hopefully this sends a message to all the parties to work in a spirit of cooperation, and we can get this done. Thank you.
There's no amendment on the floor now.
Right now, Mr. President, what I've got is a motion to replace Communication 56 with Communication 57.
67.
67.
Sorry. As amended.
As amended.
As amended now.
So no further discussion, take a roll call.
The amendment was staggered terms.
Staggered time. 2A.
Roll call, Mr. President? Yes. Okay. That's on the motion to replace. Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Councilor Cronin?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman?
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman?
Yes.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zeid?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. President, I think so. We've swapped them out. Now, I guess a vote to endorse. Is that the way to do it?
Or approve?
Endorse these terms of a proposed settlement. How do you want to proceed? Parliamentarian may have a suggestion.
Motion to approve.
Just a motion to approve.
Why not a motion
to approve?
Second.
Take another roll call on that, please.
This is the motion to approve Communication 67 as amended. Seconded, Councilor Zeid. Councilor Connell.
Yes.
Councilor Cronin.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Earls.
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman.
Yes.
Councilor Tontar.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes.
Move on to communication 59.
Communication 59
59.
is a memorandum from Sergeant Whitney to Port Taxi, carbon copy to the city clerk regarding suspension of taxi permits.
This was in committee, right?
Effective immediately, the following taxi permits are suspended in the city of Newburyport, and he lists 5 vehicle registrations. These re-inspections were scheduled for Monday, May 8th. They will be postponed indefinitely.
A motion to receive and file.
Second.
And I do that simply because we have close to identical thing in committee, which will be coming out tonight. So instead of having this linger in committee, we're basically taking the same thing out of committee. It's a memo that we had received last meeting that had gone into committee, which reflects this, if that makes any sense at all.
My only question is just a point of order. Do we have to do an emergency to receive and file on the same night? Is it new? It's new, is it not? Because it got its own number?
To take any action on a measure under the charter, I guess one does.
May just refer it to committee and receive and file next time.
We'll file it next time.
Okay.
You could, it's a separate vote by roll call, so
The sponsor has an idea of the sponsor of the motion.
I'll just rescind to receive and file, and I'll send to committee.
Second.
We'll receive and file next meeting.
So, which committee?
License permit.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Communication
Oh, yeah.
68.
You'll hear all of it.
That was the white file one?
That is a letter from Father George Moran to President O'Brien as follows. On Friday evenings of this coming summer, June 30th through September 1st, from 6 to 8:30 p.m., we are seeking approval to have a public presence on the in-street pedestrian thoroughfare. We will have a sign which will simply say, "Ask a priest." Our plan is to have a priest present to answer questions people might have in a one-on-one setting. Other members of our community will also be present. We will have a table with literature explaining all the many services and opportunities the Catholic Church has to offer. This will not be a rally, nor will it be selling anything or having any type of raffle. Simply be an opportunity to answer questions and share what the Catholic Church has to offer. If you have any questions, I would be happy to meet with you. You can reach me at, and he gives a phone number. Sincerely, Father Moran.
Motion to refer to public safety?
Second.
I was going to say neighborhood and city services.
Neighborhood and city, I'd say neighborhood and city services. Yeah, it's in street, no street.
I'll withdraw and replace, or if you'd like to make the motion.
Motion to move to neighborhood and city services.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I don't know what to say.
Opposed? Schedule a meeting.
Can we have a discussion on this?
What's it?
Well, I'm just curious, if I may. I mean, is this really in our purview? Is this not just the freedom to?
The busker.
Can't you just?
I think they could just do it.
Is this really in our purview? Do we really have to take this to committee and give them permission to put a sign up that says "Ask a priest"?
We did it for the 6th graders a couple weeks ago, did we not?
I thought we just passed.
President, thank you. And I think the council raises a fair question, and it deserves an answer. And that is that if we're going to devote public property to a use by a non-governmental entity, I think it's certainly worth at least a brief discussion. If we don't want to do it here tonight, we can certainly take it up to committee and bring it out at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
That's what we should do.
Just schedule a meeting soon, too. Thank you. Okay, that's for communications. We'll move on to orders. Order 25.
This is Chapter 13, Traffic, Section 13-181, Parking Lots. It adds the Hale Court parking lot, which is the post office parking lot. And it also designates the Hale Court parking lot under Section B as a 3-hour lot, similar to State Street lot and the Green Street lot. And
Motion to refer to public safety.
Second.
You didn't want to say anymore, did
well,
you?
it does reduce the 24 hours to 12 hours on snow emergencies.
How many spaces in the lot?
How many parking spaces in that lot?
18.
There are 18 in theory. There'll be a handicap lot and a kiosk, so in effect there'll be 17 yet to be lined out.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 26?
Section 13, 179, handicap parking. It adds one space on Summit Place, which is actually on the elbow of Summit Place near the path. It says from a point 437 feet east of Toppins Lane to a point 457 feet east of Toppins Lane, submitted Councilor Cronin.
Motion to refer to public safety.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Order 27.
Order 27 in essence states that the City Council hereby authorizes the purchase of a portion of property located at 90 Pleasant Street and 83 Merrimack Street, shown on the attached plan, for all purposes incidental to the construction and operation of a new parking garage, aka intermodal transit and parking facility. Further ordered that $2,184,000 is appropriated to pay costs thereof.
Point of order, if I may. I've been advised by the Ethics Commission and the city clerk that this is a conflict of interest. I recuse myself.
You're recusing yourself? Thank you.
Motion to refer to public, to Budget and Finance and Committee of the Whole.
Second.
Budget, Finance, and Committee of the Whole?
Budget and Finance and Committee of the Whole.
Good. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Where you been?
I've been gone.
Order 28. You couldn't hear.
Order 28 is
Gift. Sunscreen.
It is a gift. It's coming right here.
Go ahead, can you?
City Council accepts with gratitude a gift from Dermatology and Skin Health in the form of sunscreen and 3 sunscreen dispensers valued at $900, and a gift from New England Melanoma Foundation in the form of sunscreen and 2 sunscreen dispensers valued at $400,000 to be installed at the following locations: Cashman Park, Rail Trail, Beach at Plum Island, Harbor Master Facility. Submitted, Councilor Tantar.
Motion to refer to Budget and Finance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
29.
City Council accepts with gratitude a grant from the Peter and Elizabeth C. Tower Foundation in the amount of $378,792 for the purpose of implementing a regional prevention coordinator in accordance with Mass Chapter 44, Section 53A. Submitted, Councilor Tantar.
Motion to refer to Budget and Finance.
All in favor?
Aye.
Order 30.
Order 30 adds 1 handicap parking space at 13 Parsons Street through January 30th, 2019. Submitted, Councilor Eigenman.
Motion to refer to public safety.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Move on to ordinances.
Ordinance 2 is a second reading. It is an amendment to Section 2-368, specifically Board and Sewer Commissions, adding and sewer. Section 14-32, Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners. It goes on for a number of pages. It also changes Section 14-32, fees and charges. Submitted, Councilor Eigenman.
Motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Connell.
Yes.
Counselor Cronin. Yes. Counselor Devlin.
Yes.
Counselor Earls.
Yes.
Counselor Agaman.
Yes.
Counselor Tontar.
Yes.
Counselor Vogel.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Council President O'Brien.
Yes. Ordinance 5.
Second reading, Section 13-97, road races, walkathons, bicycle and other multidisciplined events. Short title, same. It is a rewrite of a number of sections, which goes on for 2.5 pages. It is submitted by Councilor Zede and Devlin.
Motion to approve on second reading?
Second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Connell.
Yes.
Counselor Cronin.
Yes.
Counselor Devlin.
Yes.
Counselor Earls.
Yes.
Counselor Agaman.
Yes.
Counselor Tontar.
Yes.
Counselor Vogel.
Yes.
Counselor Zede.
Yes.
Counselor Cameron.
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien.
Yes. Ordinance 6.
This is a first introduction. It is submitted by Counselor Agaman, and it changes Article 1 in general, Chapter 3, Animals, Section 3-2, Disposable Animal Waste. In pertinent part, no person shall appear with a dog in his or her custody on any sidewalk, gutter, street, or other public area, or any private property, neither owned nor occupied such person, without the means of removal of any feces left by such dog.
Motion to refer to Neighborhood and City Services.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's it for ordinances. We're going to committee items. Budget finance.
Motion to remove communication 31.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Motion to approve.
Second.
And what are we approving?
The
Capital improvement program.
Mr. President, motion to amend. I'd like to make a motion to amend FD 009, which I believe is on page 20, $2.5 million for a Plum Island fire station.
Second. Discussion on the amendment? Councilor Agaman?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the only amendment I'm coming forward with this year. I'm really not trying to scrutinize everything. It's a planning document, but this does not make the cut in my mind for good planning for several reasons. First of all, there is a policy longstanding in the city. It's in our 2001 master plan and repeated in the draft plan, and it's consonant with an order by Governor Ed King in the 1970s to discourage development on Plum Island and to essentially double down by investing further in infrastructure contradicts that. Secondly, there are other priorities for the fire department which I believe are much more important, and we're already going to have a challenge meeting. The Central Fire Station dates from 1978. They're going to need at least $5 million according to this very plan to redo it. I think that's more important. Similarly, there's the number 2 station out near Story Avenue. That's in a pretty sorry state. Another $3 million at least has to go to that. Finally, there doesn't seem to be any money coming from Newbury for this fire station. And this is an old story. Most of the development, most of the people, year-round and especially in summer, are in Newbury. And as important as it is to have fire protection, I don't think it's fair to the people of Newburyport to be doing all of the lifting when it comes to finance. So I would urge that we, as we have the power to do, strike this from the capital improvement program in a future year. Perhaps if there's a better argument made, it could come back. But we don't have enough money to be so charitable and casual. Thank you.
As a ward councilor, I have to rise and unfortunately disagree with my Ward 2 colleague. I would ask for you for your consideration to leave it in. I would certainly not argue that there are several details. As with many things in the CIP, it's a very broad planning document as far as contributions from other municipalities and so forth. But one thing I do know is it's a busy and crowded island, and such a facility could serve a purpose all year round. For example, during the winter, there are several issues where storms can knock out the road, and in previous years, attempts have been made, for example, to store a police cruiser or a fire protection apparatus out on the island at times when the road would be lost. It's been done, for example, in the Mosquito Building, which folks know it's too cold. Fire chief has indicated that you can freeze a fire truck whole. Literally, the water in it will freeze when it's so cold. So I'm not disagreeing with my Ward 2 councilor colleague that there are several questions, as there are, I think, about a lot of things in the CIP, but just to potentially leave the door open for it to be considered, and for the benefit of residents, provided, of course, that proper accommodation can be made for a deal to work.
Councilor Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilor Zede. I think it's a precaution and it's a safety issue. I don't think it's that we're promoting development on the island. I think we should keep it in. Often items sit in this capital improvement plan for many years. And if we were voting on this today to spend the money for us to fund the whole thing, I'd absolutely vote against it unless Newbury was kicking in its share. So I think it should stay in. I've been out there when there's been fires and it's in the summer, early summer. It's a long way to go and it takes a while to get out there. So I think having at least some sort of a forward place to station equipment year round makes sense. And whether that's a manned station or not, I would leave that up to the fire professionals. But I think to keep it in the plan makes sense.
I should note that in the Budget and Finance Committee, we did not vote to approve. We voted to bring it out to the council so that this discussion could be had over this particular amendment. Having said that, it is a plan, and the CIP is designed so that department heads can indicate the capital needs that the city will have. Fire station in Plum Island is put in fiscal year 21. So it's essentially four years from now. It's the lowest priority in the capital improvement plan. I'm going to vote with Councilor Zede and to keep it in. And as we get more information and consider it and get close to actually allocating funds, I think we'll come to a decision.
Councilor Devlin?
I might have misread the capital improvement plan. Did you say 2021 or 3,000?
Fiscal year 21.
Or 3,021. We don't, I agree with Councilor argument. We don't have the money to build a firehouse out on Plum Island. Talking about it's 4 years out. Talk about 40 years out. They have needs of building a new central firehouse. I mean, this is a wish list, but not a pipe dream list. So I would suggest that we'd want unanimous consent on this document as well for planning purposes. And so I would be in support of Councilor Argument's amendment.
Well, thank you, President. I'm kind of torn here for obvious reasons. I think we all represent not just people within our wards, even if we were ward councilors, but the interests of the city at large. And it seems to me that Councilor Eigenman is making a pretty good point, and that is we cannot, even if we want to, ignore the fact that we are providing a service that is largely in service to another community if we go forward in the rough, under the rough outline that's in the CIP. So I think it's appropriate to take it out. And that does not mean that this is an apocalyptic vision, and if something happens out there, we won't run out there with all the resources that are available to us to offer aid and assistance, whether the emergency is in Newburyport or in Newbury. We work together, and I have complete faith that the fire department and all of our emergency services will work in conjunction as they have and as they do. But I do think we have to send a message to our neighbors in a neighboring community who are perhaps not paying close enough attention to their responsibilities to the common good out there. And I'm going to vote with Councilor Eigenman on that.
Councilor Cronin.
This is a very perplexing issue because it is public safety. But one of the things that Councilor Eigenman failed to say was that we have a 1978 fire station at Central Station. We have the West End station that is in desperate need of being fixed. We have a aerial tower ladder truck that is right at the end of its life. That's 1.5 million. And we're also on I don't want to say on schedule because no, we aren't on schedule. But we have a plan anyway to incorporate EMS, emergency medical service, ambulance service into our fire service. These are all 5 things are lofty goals, or 6 things are lofty goals. But FD station out on the island is way down at the end of the list, and I really understand where Councilor Zede is coming from, and I have empathy for him because there is a need. However, a building that's probably going to stay largely uninhabited for most of the year is a maintenance issue unto itself. And until there's a plan to actually maybe regionalize or do something out there with our neighbors out on the island, I can't go forward with that either.
Just a rebuttal to a couple of the points, and then I'll sit down. So even if it were free, there's no staffing plan for this building. Even if we were to agree, and I don't agree, and I'll tell you in a minute why I don't, that the capital improvement plan is a wish list, and you put in absolutely everything that you could ever want, where's Newbury's capital improvement plan? It's just irresponsible for us to be bearing that burden. That's been beaten to death. Okay, now the capital improvement plan. I don't think we're treating it correctly, and I've beaten this drum this is the 4th year now. You don't just put into a capital improvement plan anything that you could possibly desire. It's supposed to be a prioritization. So even if it didn't come from the general fund, that means Nancy London, our grant writer, is going to be spending her time trying to chase grants. The mayor's office is going to be negotiating some kind of a land swap with Fish and Wildlife. That's what's alluded to in the CIP. I think it's our job, it says, the city council goes through the CIP and decides what is worth spending time on and what isn't. And this one isn't. It just isn't. We already are, even without this, as Councilor Cronin pointed out, there's $10 million in capital improvements that the fire department needs in the next 4 fiscal years. Even without this. It's just irresponsible. Thank you.
Councilor Zede.
I was going to hold my general comments until we got through the amendment, but I might as well just say now, I am, of course, in support of leaving this in the document, but I plan to vote present on the capital improvement plan, and Councilor Eigenman talked briefly about some of the reasons. This council, several months ago, put in a resolution recommending a capital line, and the idea behind the capital line was every year in your operating budget, which we've just completed our budget hearings, you have a line for capital. And by having that, eventually, and we've made overtures towards OPEB and other things, just even something small just to show that we're serious about it or talking about it, we would have an actual way to have this conversation. Right now, with all due respect, we are talking about essentially nothing. There is no funding plan behind this. There's nothing that says in 2021 that we will build this or any of the other things, even the ones that are a level 1 high priority that are due in 3 months. I said it before, and I'll beat this drum for as long as I can. We are reliant on free cash, we are reliant on debt, and we are reliant on a very small, relatively small capital stabilization fund, which is essentially a savings account. We recently made a transfer into there, which was good. But when you look at the just mammoth needs that we have in the city, by not having any money behind it, we're not really having a real conversation about priorities. I mean, that's my honest opinion. So If we can get to a point, again, and the difference between what we talked about on this floor several months ago and a capital stabilization fund is a capital line you spend every year. So if you have a $60 million city budget and you have a $1 million capital line, economy goes south, the $1 million is still in the budget, just as we do with all the other departments. And so it's frustrating because we sit here and I need to make the argument for my ward because that's my job, but I can't even go to somebody and say, yes, if this stays in here, that in 2021 you will have a firehouse. In fact, there's probably a greater chance not than it will happen. And that's very frustrating, and we're talking about potentially, maybe some councilors' opinion is a surplus or an extra fire station. But there are things in here that are not extra. We're going to have a fire station, as been mentioned, that's literally going to fall apart on us, or a ladder truck, which is going to eventually go out of service on its own. We heard a lot about that. And so, again, I ask you to keep it in just because in the context of this, that's the same bar or standard that we're using for all the other items. But in terms of a greater discussion on capital, it comes every year. It has to happen. We've been very fortunate to have free cash generated, which, as we know, is partially from underspending in lines, but also from new growth. New growth can come and go. But if you can get something in your capital line, into your budget, that has a better chance of staying every year, just as the way we don't back off departments. So I'll leave you with that and stay with that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? So the motion is to...
Motion's to amend the CIP by eliminating the fire station.
Roll call.
Councilor Connell.
I'm sorry, the motion is
The
to
motion
amend.
is to amend. Motion to amend
Yes.
the capital plan. Councilor Cronin.
Yes.
Councilor Devlin.
Yes.
Councilor Earls.
No.
Councilor Eigenman.
Yes.
Councilor Tontar.
No.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
No.
Councilor Cameron.
No.
Council President O'Brien.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next.
Motion to approve the CIP as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Present.
One present, one absent. Thank you.
Motion to remove transfer 22 in part, specifically the $130,000, $130,765 to sewer municipal insurance.
Second.
Not the other, though. You live in...
Not the hydrants on Plum Island.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Same motion, if I may, for public utilities, because we had it jointly.
Second.
Bring it up.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. President, the $130,000... Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And the meeting intending, by the way, is to keep the 1.9 million in committee.
Okay.
The $130,765 is necessary to pay Maya, the insurers, for bill that's due. So we supported it in committee.
This is our first expenditure from the Plum Island Settlement Fund, so I just wanted to give a brief update, at least as far as where we are. The 130, as the Ward 4 councilor mentioned, is basically water under the bridge. It's an insurance payment we have to make. We need 8 votes, of course, to withdraw from this fund. Just to give residents who maybe live on the island or visit the island an update, the hydrant project is in process. We spoke about it quite a bit, actually, in our respective committees, Budget and Finance and Public Utilities, and have gone through the design, and more will be forthcoming on that, and probably approval towards the end of June once the contractor bids come in and the final project can be decided upon. Thank you.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to remove transfer 25.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Same motion, Mr. President, for public utilities.
Second.
Motion to remove.
Motion to approve?
So we have to vote on. Motion to approve. Motion, did we vote on motion to remove?
Remove. No,
Yeah.
not yet.
We haven't
Both
yet.
committees?
Both
Yeah.
committees, yeah.
Motion to approve?
We haven't voted to remove yet.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve. Go ahead, Mr. President. We considered this in committee. It was a 3-0 vote in favor. So, you know,
This is LED street
this is the LED streetlight conversion. The city has, the total cost of the conversion is about approximately $500,000. The city has obtained about $400,000 roughly in grants from a number of sources, and needs an additional $98,000. Essentially, the expenditure by the city of $98,000 will result in savings in electricity use of $70,000 a year into the, you know, forever. The LED lights are anticipated to last 20 years, so, you know, simply from a financial perspective, it makes sense to do. There is a concern, you should know, we discussed in committee, the American Medical Association has put out a statement on use of LED lights that tend toward the blue spectrum of light rather than the orange that our current lights do. And they actually advised that, that we only install lights that were Kelvin 3000 or below. The lights that have been selected to use are 3000 Kelvin, and the lowest that the city can obtain a grant from the National Grid, you know, to do this job. So again, 3,000 was what the AMA did recommend as a limit. So the committee voted 3-0 to support this. The installation of the new lights will take place by the end of the summer, fall. And, you know, they will require, the lights, LED lights last a lot longer than our current lights, and as a ward councilor, I welcome that because I get a lot of calls when lights go out and we have to call back and get around to it. So I think that will help that problem. Also, I should note that once the lights are up, and they were very carefully selected to provide sufficient lighting and not to impose on households, the lights will be more vertical along the road rather than 360 degrees as the current lights are. However, there will be a line established, so once they're up, if someone complains, the lights can be shifted so they're dimmer in that area. So I think it's a good thing for the city to do. I urge you to vote yes.
Just want to say on Mosley Ave, on the first part of Mosley Ave,
yep,
they put an LED light in, the first one, and the second one is not an LED light. Go up there some night and just stand in the middle of Chase Street and see the difference, and the LED light is very nice in the neighborhood. The neighbors like it, so. And that was done last year, just to see as a test, to see the difference between the lights, and it definitely looks better in my opinion, and the neighbors too, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
Motion to remove transfer 26, library salary staff 10K to library maintenance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to approve?
Second.
Again, this is a pretty straightforward motion. The what do they call it? HUV has to be
HVAC?
HVAC has to be air conditioning. Thank you. Yeah, when you need them, have to be repaired. We're going to be getting it. We have another one that came in for another 10,000 because the estimate was low. First one. So committee vote 3-0 to approve. HVAC.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good.
That's it, Mr. President.
That's it? Okay.
Yes, that's it. We
No fire?
had a problem with it.
Okay, Train education? License and permits.
Motion to remove, let's start with the easy ones first. Communication 52, outdoor seating for Mandarava.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Discussion?
Thank you, Mr. President. all of the appropriate paperwork and insurance is in place. It was voted 2 to 0 in favor in committee. 3, oh yeah, that was, we did that last week, you're right, the meeting, 3, I'm sorry, it was voted 3 to 0, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye. Opposed? Good. Motion to remove communication 53, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead. Motion to approve.
Second.
Same statements, voted 3 to 0 in committee, all the paperwork is in place.
That's a question.
Certainly.
Yeah, just on this one, I had a little trouble reading their diagram. Are you guys okay with their? Did you figure all that out? It all adds up. Okay.
And if it's not satisfactory to you, please let me know.
Yeah.
In favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote.
Here we go. Motion to remove communications 57 and 58 together, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I think, yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Chair. We could get into the nitty gritty of this, but I'll try to make it short. That a taxi company went along the normal inspections of their cabs, and some things were pointed out. There were some cabs that were taken off the road until repairs were made. Again, I'm doing the cliff notes here. I don't think we need to get in the weeds. Officer Whitney found in the next few nights that those cabs were on the street and were violated for certain reasons. Drivers were given summons, and the cab company itself was given summons. The recommendation was, because that happened over a series of nights, that Officer Whitney wanted to know, with the marshal's consent, or the marshal's approval, I should say, that it could come in front of the council to suspend all the licenses for this cab company. We did have the owner of the company come in tonight and spoke at length about this, and I was reticent to take someone's living away from them. I know there's safety violations, and I proposed what I consider a pretty harsh compromise, that everything gets re-inspected again, all the cabs then have to meet that, and when all 8 cabs do meet inspection, even if they met it before, a 30-day clock starts, and if any violation other than moving violation would be just on the driver itself, but any other violation would then suspend all their licenses. The owner agreed to this. I think it's fair that they're given another chance. They promised that everything is in order at this point. If I've left something out, please fill in the blanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm not sure what exactly is on the floor here. There's no motion. Yeah. I think probably at this point in time, there would be a motion to leave it in committee, I think would be the best bet. If I could get a second on that and then comment, that would be great. So I'd like to leave it in committee.
Second.
Thank you, and then discuss.
Move the table?
Concerns?
Motion on.
Oh, motion.
You have to.
What motion was it?
Remove to approve, to remove.
No,
To
we
remove.
removed it.
Yeah.
Just removed.
So it's been removed from committee.
Right.
So it's on the table.
So I'm asking, the motion is to put it back into committee.
So you're referring back to
refer
licensing
it back to
permits?
committee, but I'd like to discuss. Is that not appropriate?
Sure.
Second.
Up to the president.
Is there more?
Not motions, no.
Okay, thank you. So just to follow on what the counselor at large was saying, it was an interesting discussion in committee, and as Councilor Earls indicated, it was not our desire to cease the operation at this moment. Officer Whitney was right there in the room. All of these cabs will go through inspection. There's going to be a sharp eye left on this operation. Also, there was other violations aside from just the safety. There was the lack of posting of fares. There was lack of posting of licenses. There was a number of violations, quite lengthy actually. And the first instinct, of course, is to go, slap them and to cease the operation. We took a breath. And we're going to start the clock once all these have been, all these safety issues have been addressed, and if there's just one step over the line, the operation will cease. That's how we left it.
Motion send it back to committee, all in favor?
Mr. President, Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm just, the only thing, I don't have a problem with the compromise. I'm just confused about, does the police department have the authority to execute the deal you just mentioned? So we're basically taking no action. We're just sitting back and we're saying, all right, police department, within your authority, you execute this, which is get them re-inspected, give them the 30-day, and then I assume if they break that, they'll come back to us and our action would be to suspend at that time. So we're doing nothing essentially by sending it back to committee. I got that?
Exactly.
Well, it's a little, just a slightly different. I mean, we hold the power. That the police department has the right to suspend the operation and put it to us as to what to do with it, is essentially what's happened. So they have suspended the operation to a certain degree. And so now they're going to go and inspect and allow the operation to continue with this 30-day, one strike and you're out type thing.
So the only reason I'm asking is just, I mean, if you said that to me, the first thing that would come to mind is we do it by city council order. We'd say that here's the deal we would like to prescribe, and that's all I'm trying to make sure is we're not opening ourselves to any liability or concern that we are not adhering to, I'm not an expert on taxi law. We must have an ordinance that says these are the powers, et cetera. That's all I'm trying to get clear. As long as you say it's within the parameters, then I'm fine. I'm comfortable with it.
All the ordinances are cited actually in the paperwork that was given. So the officer has stated every chapter that was violated basically and how it gives him the power to suspend.
Okay. And to reinstate at his consent. Okay, so we're leaving it to them for 30 days, basically, and they'll come back to us if they need something more.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
Thank you for your indulgence. Motion to remove ordinance 11, which is about
second
11 years old.
Aye.
Motion to approve.
Second. Discussion?
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, so somebody make note of the time, because we could be out here for as long as this has been in committee. There's actually another document in place that was authored by Councilor at Large Devlin, who's made some amendments, if you will, or some actually corrections or edits to this document in front of you. I'm going to leave it to the author to make those, put those out there. Very complicated. It's taken us a year, as Councilor Eigenman will certainly point out, that we've been going through this. Some of the genesis around this is a couple of things. One, just to put it bluntly, the Dos Amigos was selling tacos and a taco stand went in on N Street. There's vendors on N Street where they don't particularly man their station. There's complaints, if you will, or concerns by the brick and mortar restaurants and businesses that the vendors on N Street are not paying their fair share, and so on and so forth, and there's that concern. Then there's the whole food truck piece. There wasn't really any regulations against that, or we needed to do some amending to that. So we've been around and around and around. I can't even begin to tell you how many. You can take a look at how many times this has been amended, and I'm not even sure that this is as many times. So I'd like to leave it to Councilor Devlin to point out his changes, if I will, and leave it to Councilor Eigenman, who's also an important part of this, particularly since the downtown district is his ward. So if that's fair, I'll leave it to you, sir.
I would actually yield to Councilor Eigenman and then follow him. I think that would make sense.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this will be quicker than my speech on the Central Waterfront, I promise. Right now, there's no notice given when a vendor application comes in, so it's kind of we learned that the hard way, it's kind of by ambush. So there isn't any guidance really to the licensing board on what it is they're supposed to look at for giving licenses. So this ordinance fixes those two things. It also closes a loophole for sales from parked vehicles. Ice cream trucks, things that stop for only up to 15 minutes at a time, are actually regulated somewhere else as peddlers. That's this very quaint 19th century language. But if we didn't pass this ordinance, we had a loophole that actually the city clerk had come up against a couple years ago, where you could take a truck, park it on State Street, and so long as you don't get a parking ticket, you could sell T-shirts all day, and you wouldn't need a license, and we wanted to close that loophole. One of the more controversial things is food trucks. All of the councilors got a very lengthy email with attachments from Metzi's, which is a well-known food truck operator. He also has a brick and mortar operation, as you know. There is a regulation that was adopted by the health department in 2014. Unfortunately, it's not posted anywhere on the city website, and it's not codified. So until Metzi actually sent a copy to us, many of us had never seen it before, but we'd heard of it. And it sort of filled the gap and covered all kinds of things about food trucks. However, the city council has never weighed in on food trucks. We never authorized the health department to promulgate the regulations. So what this ordinance does, and there's an amendment that I'm cooperating with Councilor Devlin on, is it leaves sanitary codes to the health department. That's what they do. They decide how to protect public health, and they still will. But it would preempt their decisions on location. Because in that regulation, there are rules about you can't have any food trucks downtown, you can have one here, you can't have one there, and that's really not their purview. That's licensing board stuff, and if you pass this ordinance, the licensing board will decide it, where we think it should be. You already heard it's taken a year. Other things that we've worked in, there isn't any automatic renewal. Now, we got some testimony from people saying, well, you know, I've invested in this business, and if I have a license, I should automatically get it the next year. This consciously does not do that, because it's not like, you know, tables and chairs in front of your store. It's not like putting a sign in front of your store. We're basically auctioning off, you know, public space, and it's not automatic. It's just a license. You have to prove your merits every year. Now, if you're doing a good job, you're probably going to get renewed, but we cannot guarantee it. It's not a lifetime license. On in-street, the current rule says 3 licenses. Originally, when I put this in, we thought, okay, 3 is too many, let's get it down to 2. After a lot of back and forth, I'm proposing we stick with 3. But, as you heard from testimony, it would earmark 1 only for artisans, because we don't want the food vendors who can outbid everybody to take all 3. We don't want a monoculture. So on in-street, no fewer than 1 must be to an artisan. Now, it could be all 3 artisans, but it could never be all 3 food. Fees, yeah, they're going up. I mean, but they haven't been touched apparently in many, many, many years. Again, this is a scarce resource. You're giving up in-street, our only pedestrian, you know, mall, big tourism spot. It was time the fees went up. Also, they're prorated. So if you're only operating in the summer, you don't pay for the whole 12 months. You only pay for 3. Also, there is a higher fee and higher insurance coverage required for food trucks. 2 basic reasons. We had testimony from Metzi himself, in fact, about the kind of revenue that he's able to generate. It's much higher than the artisans. That's one on the revenue side. So the value of what he's getting is pretty good. And remember, there could be up to 3 food trucks, not just him. So he may have competition. And then trucks are much more dangerous. It's normal in other cities to require higher insurance premiums of $2 million coverage, because they could run somebody over. A hot dog stand is not going to run somebody over. So I hope you vote for this, and then we'll go through the amendments very quickly. There would be, instead of, again, in your packet it says 2 full season licenses, but instead it would now be 3 on in-street, and at least 1 shall be made available solely to vendors of art, crafts, or other artisanal wares, merchandise, or goods, to the exclusion of any food or beverages. That would be inserted at 9-114A. I will hand this to the clerk. Another change. Sorry, this coming from Councilor Devlin, and he can speak to it. What did I do with it? Excuse me, bear with me. Okay, so Section 9-113 B boy number 2. The city clerk shall cause, at the applicant's sole expense, we've added that, notice to be published in a newspaper of general circulation. That's normal, the applicant pays, right here. What? I'm sorry, C Charlie, I beg your pardon. C Charlie number 2. Then also in 9-114, the point I made about the health regulation, so there'll be a sentence added at Councilor Devlin's suggestion, and I move for that. This ordinance shall supersede any other regulation promulgated by the Board of Health relative to geographic limitations on transient vendors. You get the point. On section 9-133, subsection 7, the word location is changed to locations in parentheses because the licensing commission may decide they want to give multiple locations for a truck.
I think that's C4.
I'm sorry, did I screw that up again? C4. No. No. It's 9-133, number 7.
133.
133, yeah.
113.
No. 133.
Yeah, you said 113. I was all
I'm
confused.
sorry, 133.
Can you read the text?
Yes, it'll now read number 7, the location, open parentheses, S, close parentheses, where the transient vending business is proposed to be conducted. So for example, if a food truck wanted to be on Greenleaf Street behind the CVS for half a day and then move to the industrial park another half a day, that would be possible. It wouldn't just be one location.
I'm sorry, could you read that again? 7?
7, the location, open parentheses, S, close parentheses. So it's up to the licensing commission. They can approve multiple locations in a license for the reasons stated.
It's also back on 9113 under 4 as well.
Okay, I beg your pardon. All right, then under number 9, there was an L missing from the word shall, 3 lines down. Sorry about that. And there are 2 amendments that I am not prepared to support, but I will mention them to you. One is Councilor Devlin wanted to strike the last sentence in 9-132 on insurance. That's the extra insurance for a vehicle. I personally don't support that, but let's debate it. And then 9-135, C Charlie. There are hour limitations in the current ordinance, which would not change. Vendors shall be licensed to engage in business only no earlier than 8 a.m. and no later than 9 p.m. on any licensed day. Councilor Devlin is suggesting adding the following language, unless otherwise specifically agreed to by the License Commission in its written decision based on the nature of the locations and service and any public input. I'm not prepared to support that, but let's debate it. Did I get everything?
Nope, 9-131 fees.
What's that? 9-131. 9-131.
Oh, yeah, that's 1,500.
Oh, fees, yes. Again, Councilor Devlin is suggesting that the annual license fee for a food truck license be reduced from $2,500 to $1,500. Again, I don't support that, but that should be in the record for debate. Good? Bruce?
Yes, and out of committee, there were a couple of other thoughts, so I don't know how you want to proceed. You go ahead.
I was just going to suggest we take the amendments one at a time so we can get onto the same page as far as the document. That's all.
So let me give you some background. This stretches back to my time on the License Commission. Kind of a number of different issues. Number one, transient vendors on In Street were our biggest source of complaint. Either by the bricks and mortars or by other vendors or by people coming in, other transient vendors, or by people coming in wanting more transient vendors. You know, they wanted to get on the list. They didn't know why these were perpetual. They didn't know why we didn't have any more in town. Members of the public, there was an ice lolly company that was in the next to Abraham Bagels in that kind of recessed area. And one of their things is to promote their business. They would have liked to have sold ice lollies from a transient vendor cart. And then I was also the acting chair when Metzi's came in with their food truck, and we had the alternatives of the hawker's peddler's license, which the predominant mode of transit mentioned in that statute, in that ordinance, which is taken directly from the statute, was horse-drawn wagons. I could have applied that, or we could have applied the transient vendor ordinance, which didn't quite fit what a motorized and wheeled vehicle. It mentioned carts and tents. And again, limited to in-street. There's some information that was sent around by the owner of Metzi's, some email communications between Andy Port, former councilor Ari Herzog, and Bob Bracey and the building inspector at the time, trying to figure out what is the proper way to write ordinances for the food truck, and appeared the answer was punt it. And that's how it ended up with the Board of Health, who was more than willing to fill the gap. But they wrote an ordinance, which is essentially legislation, restricting use and areas, and that's our prerogative. That ordinance does, in my mind, that regulation doesn't have any power. If someone wanted to come in, this is actually helping protect food trucks. If someone came in and said, you can't have a food truck, there's an argument for that in our ordinance. There's also a memorandum of understanding with Metzi's from the mayor's office. I had never seen the Board of Health regulations and I looked at the beginning of all this, and I was on the license commission when the food truck was looking for permission from the city. And they're not even published, but I had heard of the memorandum of understanding with the mayor's office. Neither one of those are going to be helpful to Metzi's or helpful to us as Councilor Eigenman part on the other side of the coin. If someone parks on State Street and starts selling tacos in front of Agave. So this is definitely within our jurisdiction. We need to work with the Board of Health so that they are charged with enforcing the state sanitary code and local health regulations. We have to get them to parse down their regulations so that they're focused only on that, they don't conflict, and we don't have two parallel license applications running here, or requirements. I wanted to push this out, and Jared wanted to push this out, and Councilor Eigenman wanted to push this out, and the other members of the council want to push it out. It sounds like it's not quite there, but we've been around and around in circles on this, and we're at the point where I don't really care what the insurance premiums are. I changed it because one of the people who showed up regularly was Eric Metzendorf, who said, that seems expensive. Why can't we just keep it consistent? I think it's up for debate, but I think we're close enough. We're 95% of the way there that it was important to get input from the council itself as to whether they felt we were 95% of the way there or they wanted it to come back to us to work it out. So I will yield to the chairman from the licensing permits if he wants to.
I would just like to suggest, if I may, Mr. President, I have the changes to the document that you have in front of you. I have them very clearly in front of me. I could step us through each one of these if you wish.
Well, I handed it to the clerk.
City clerk, so we're going to take them one at a time.
It's up to you. You want me to do it?
I'm about to walk through it if you don't.
Well, the clerk has them now. I gave your document to the clerk. He's got it.
Well, let me just talk on them briefly. The first first of all, this provides us a structure, and this is a good structure. This is something that
Let's take each one of them. I don't want to go through and hear it all now. Just take each one. Anyone wants to discuss it, they can discuss it.
Okay.
But let's get these amendments going before 11 o'clock. Okay. Go ahead.
So, Mr. President, the first one that I see in front of me is on C2, literally 9-113C2. Inserts the language "at the applicant's sole expense." So it now reads, "The city clerk shall cause at the applicant's sole expense notice to be published, etc., in a newspaper."
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve that.
Second.
Who moved? Did you move?
Whatever.
Discussion?
Just very briefly, I don't like C2 at all. Just because I think newspapers, we've gotten away from this in other areas of our code. I mean, we're still publishing things with a paper, and I think it's $400 or $500 to put something in there. I don't know. It just seems to me like an outdated mode of communication, regardless of who's paying for it. Can we do something else? I mean, it goes on the city website, but as I said, we've gone away from this and other things. In fact, we've cut our own budget where we publish things in the newspaper because we hear from people, I didn't see it anyways, or I don't get the paper and what have you. So can we do, at the sole expense of the applicant, a letter to the abutters, maybe more akin to what a zoning board or a planning board might do?
Others, you can't do that. Councilor Devlin.
That is covered later on in the ordinance, that there is a notice to abutters. This is a common statutory and notice requirement. Liquor licensing, entertainment is also published in a newspaper of general circulation in the community.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Not one no? Okay, next one? It passes?
The next one is the change. 9-114 restricted areas A. It changes 2 full season licenses to 3 full season licenses.
Actually, you've skipped.
What?
You've skipped. It's on page 3, C4, the letter S on the third paragraph, third sentence, feet of locations.
That's okay.
Do you want all the changes or not?
I think we're doing one at a time.
Why don't we go down the page?
It's a scrivener's error.
C4, third line.
It's just an S on location.
Of the proposed business.
Got you.
I have it in blue. Would that help?
Sure.
Is there a motion to approve that?
Motion to approve the S.
Second. Which one, to approve the 3 licenses?
We're on the S, which is
Yes.
Just gonna add the letter S.
Adding an S.
on C4. We're adding an S to locations. That was
Apostrophe S? I'm kidding.
I think it might.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Possessive S.
Next one was the...
next one, I believe, is 9-114 restricted areas A, where we increase 2 full season licenses to 3.
Hold it.
There's one above
You
that,
missed one
though.
right above it. Supersede any other
The
regulation.
language is included to say, this ordinance shall supersede any regulations
Correct.
promulgated by the Board of Health relative to the geographic limitations on transient vendors.
Motion to approve that.
Thank you.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Now we are at the change from 2 full season licenses to 3.
This is the third time, so if we miss this one, we're out. We'll go home. Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make an amendment to that amendment, that it be 4 licenses with, and then later on it speaks to artisan licenses. And I would like to see that 2 of those 4 go to artisans.
No less than 2.
No less
No
than
less
2.
than 2. All right.
Second, his amendment.
So the amendment to the amendment.
Yes.
4. I understand it increasing 2 to 4.
Council Cronin.
Thank you. And I'll address this to the president because I have no idea who is leading this charge. I have not heard one comment from any of the committee members about the feeling of the brick and mortar downtown, as far as how this affects them, what their input was, if they were involved in the process. And I'd like just a little background on that.
Councilor Argument?
Yes, they were notified. In fact, we got written comments from New England Development as the landlord for most of the tenants downtown last summer, and their comments were incorporated in here. For example, the idea that you have to be present at your cart. You can't just leave the cart out unattended. That was one of their ideas. We put that in. So I think we've accounted for most things, but, and the chair can tell you more.
Well, just the general overall feeling is that in discussions with the licensing commission, who we had also in committee, directing them to have consideration as to what it is that they are approving with regard to the local brick and mortar. So that has been hashed and has been discussed, and we gave direction to the licensing commission to consider that, and that's in the language as well. So that's there. And again, there's been plenty of input from lots of brick and mortar vendors.
Councilor Z?
So I'm just going to ask directly, could the Ward 2 councilor comment on whether 4 is acceptable to his constituents in that area and the at-large
The answer is no. So when we, again, when we originally put this in, we were cutting it down to 2, and the idea was to shift one of the food vendors to Cashman. So just keeping the status quo at 3, but earmarking one that has to be for artisans seemed like the right compromise. I gave my word to John Brown, and I'll do it publicly here too, that I will revisit that, and we'll focus specifically on his point, which came in very late, that you need more than one artisan to make it work. But I would urge the council to get this out so that we have the reform done. We had consensus with the brick and mortar on keeping it at 3. I have not gone to them on 4. I want to work with John Brown and the other vendors. It could be as many as 3, by the way. All 3 in Eaton Street could be artisans, and he would get his goal. It's just that it's not earmarked for more than 1. So I actually cannot support the 4, in part because of my discussions with the brick and mortar people.
Councilor Earls?
I do support the 4 with no less than 2 going to artisans, because as was just stated, that an artisan will do better when there's another artisan, and this does pave the way, maybe even as a test market, to show the brick and mortar that artisan is a different market than the food or mass marketing. So I don't think this is going to be adverse at all on the brick and mortar. I think it'll help both artisans, and I think it'll help in-street.
Just really briefly, what is the status of the 3 current ones? Are all 3 issued? Don't have to tell me who they are, but are all 3 currently issued? And they're good right now under our current ordinance forever and ever, essentially? Or do they have an expiration?
They expire at the end of the year.
Okay. And, well, how many are artisans now?
1 artisan, 2 food.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the amendment is 4.
I believe it's to increase 2 to 4, but also that there be no less than 2 artisans. Same motion.
Roll call.
Councilor Collins?
No.
Councilor Cronin?
No.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman?
No.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
No.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor O'Brien?
No.
Motion fails.
There
is a motion on the floor, I believe, to increase 2 to 3.
And earmark 1 for artisans.
Well, I was going to get to that, but the other change, if we want to do both together, is that and at least 1 such license shall be granted whose primary business is sale of artisan products.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
There's also in blue here the in-street licenses, but I assume that we'll call that
Next
administrative.
Sure.
Next change?
The next one, the next blue change would be from $2,500.
This is section 9, 131?
Correct.
Thank you.
To $1,500. Am I right?
Yes.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Council Vogel?
I would rise in opposition to that change. I think that the $2,500 is a good number.
Council Devlin?
The change was suggested by the old lone food truck operator that was expensive. I did some research. Most expensive one I could find was $1,000 in Norwood in Needham for the similar type of license. Boston has a $500 fee. Thank you.
Councilor Z.
I was thinking about motioning to make it even lower, but I'll support it at 1,000, and the way I'm looking at it is the change.
Motion is 1,500.
1,000. Cut 1,000.
1,000. All right, so I would like to make it 1,000 then. And here's why. I'm just looking at it as a change. What is it this year, and what is it expected to go to avoid having the shock of a big change? So it's my understanding now, and it's crossed out here, $600 currently, and so, you'd be going to $1,000, and then I believe food trucks, if I understand correctly, which isn't written in here, is like something like $400. So to go from $400 to $1,500 in 1 year, I think seems like a steep increase in one shot.
Councilor Argument?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but the $600 is only for a season, and we're getting rid of the season concept. So now you get 12 months, you don't just get a season. So the $600 was only really going to get you 3 months.
But arguably, it doesn't have a lot of value for have a cart in December, does it?
Sure it does.
Chestnuts.
So what is the amendment? They're cutting it 1,500 or cutting to 1,000?
1,500 and make it 1,000 so that they're...
Strike 2,500 to make it...
Yeah, that's
okay, strike 2,500 and make it 1,000.
Make it 1,000?
So that there's...
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Is there a
Second. Wait a minute.
You already have a motion.
The motion on the floor to strike the 2,500 to 1,500.
Right, so this is a motion to amend that.
Great. Did the clerk understand that we already had a previous motion to go from 2,500 to 1,500? Isn't that already before us?
Yes.
It's on the floor.
Yeah.
It would be a motion to amend the amendment.
Okay.
Just like the second last one.
Thank you.
If seconded, yes.
I don't know if it was second. No second?
Okay.
Second.
I told you to look at the time.
The motion on the floor is to reduce it from 2,500.
I think you guys needed to meet another year on this.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Councilor Connell?
No.
Councilor Cronin?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
No.
Councilor Earls?
No.
Councilor Agaman?
No.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
No.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
No.
Motion fails. We're back to, on the floor, a motion to reduce it to 1,500.
Any further discussion on that? Roll call.
Reduce it to 1,000.
Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Councilor Cronin?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
No.
Councilor Agaman?
No.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
Yes.
Motion passes. It is now at 1,500. Next would be 9-132, insurance. Where the language beginning, in addition, comma, no license shall be issued under this division, all the way to additional insured is stricken.
That's basically the $1 million to $2 million
That is $1 million to $2 million.
for truck.
9-132.
9-132.
This right here. Striking all this out.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I heard it.
Second.
Second, thank you.
Discussion. Roll call.
Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Councilor Cronin?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Agaman?
No.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
No.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next.
Page 5, 9-133, application 7. adding the parentheses S, close parentheses, after the word location.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right.
Aye. All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Next.
Moving on to page 6, we have 9-135, general restrictions. C, as in Charlie, we are adding the language, unless otherwise specifically agreed to by the License Commission in its written decision based on the nature of the locations of service and any public input. That is after the language that says license to engage in business no earlier than 8 a.m. and no later than 9 p.m. on any licensed day.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? All, Councilor Bevel?
Just very quickly, it was suggested by the food truck operators they might want to sell, breakfast burritos, and what difference does it make if it's on the public way in front of a building in the industrial park that there are no residents around, that it won't cause a problem. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
Because you're not the only ones voted.
I'm pleased to report I do not see any more blue.
Oh, thank God. Councilor Z?
At the risk of being tarred and feathered, I have a couple amendments of my own I'd like to propose just quickly. Under 9-111, the very first section, definitions, I wonder if my colleagues would accept an amendment just saying, for clarity, this chapter 9 is intended to refer only to the public way, and that any operations on private land would be governed by the City of Newburyport zoning ordinance. We did something very similar in the sign amendment, just to make it explicitly clear that this is a regulation for the public way, not for private property, which would be governed separately by our zoning code. I'll make that motion.
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Councilor Devlin?
It is covered in the definition of the temporary transient business is defined as any exhibition and sale of goods, food, blah, 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 that is carried on in or from by any means parked vehicle, including food trucks or tent booth, on the public way or at any other real property owned or in the possession or control of the city, including without limitation all city parks. Then the next definition, transient vendor, says you only need a license or defines transient vendor as somebody who is engaged in transient business. And then the next section, 9-112, says you only need a license if you're a transient vendor engaged in transient business.
Yeah, there's another protection too. If you look at the heading, Chapter 9 only applies to streets, sidewalks, and other public places.
Okay, I'll withdraw that one then. Okay, fair enough. Second one is, this would require a few changes in the text, so I'll just ask if there's general support for it. I have been on the 2-year bandwagon since the signs ordinance, and I know that I attended a few of the committee hearings on this, and certainly an automatic renewal, I think, is a non-starter. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but maybe one compromise would be to offer the licenses for a 2-year period rather than one. I am sympathetic to folks who may be contemplating an investment. You got to spin up quite an operation. If you're going to have a food truck, or if you're going to have even if you're going to have a vendor cart, you've got to buy it, you've got to outfit it, you've got to get ready, probably apply for possibly for other licenses and insurance and what have you. I think maybe 2 years would be a reasonable compromise. So rather than just spit out the text, I will ask for, if with the president's okay, for discussion briefly on.
Motion?
Well, I mean, it will require several text changes, I think, to clarify that the fees are per year, and that you get a renewal for 2 years. So I'll hold for a second and see if.
Well, I'll discuss it. I'll comment on that. I understand in some of the lower, less involved situations such as signs and whatnot, I understand that. But we're talking about some serious involvement here with the food trucks and the vendors, and a lot of compliance that has to happen. And I think that if there's 2 years ahead of you, if you're licensed and you've got 2 years ahead of you, and you get complacent, it's a little bit easier to become complacent, knowing that if you've only got a year in front of you and you're going to be in front of the board again, and they're going to be looking at you for your compliance, I think that would work a little bit cleaner. And the board, the licensing board, you know, they have, let them have their say in their way. I don't think we need to over-regulate all this or under-regulate it.
Yeah, I don't think, I thought about the 2 years, and again, I think it's a different situation. I think a 1-year cycle is normal. I mean, just as I took my medicine on that fee for food trucks and it got clipped, you know, I don't think any other cities are giving out multiple year, it's essentially a franchise that you're giving, so you want to be able to have every year check on them and decide if you want to change it up and see how they're doing. So I don't think that one is wise. I would not support that.
The renewal issue came up. It was stated by the owner of Metzi's, by the way, that we have not received no complaints about the food trucks, neither has the license commission, but the food truck. So part of it is, why are we fixing something that's not broken? But his statement was, it takes $30,000 to outfit one of these trucks. It's a significant investment, and he could lose it each year. So he was really speaking to the fact that, you know, as long as he stayed in compliance, he would want it to be renewed automatically. I think this is a fair compromise to say, and it incentivizes investment in a food truck, that to say at least for 2 years, that doesn't prevent the license commission from pulling you in because they have a complaint and suspending your license, just like it happened with the taxi cabs, suspending your license or even revoking your license for sustained complaints. So I think this is a reasonable adjustment, you know, to accommodate a business in town for which we haven't received any complaints.
Sorry, one last difference. Again, unlike, say, an A-frame sign or your tables and chairs, which have to go in Newburyport, you can drive the truck somewhere else. I mean, there are 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts. He operates, for example, at the Plum Island Airport, which is Newbury. So, you know, it's not, oh my God, if he doesn't get renewed, he's out of business. That's just not true.
Councilor Earls?
Just going back to the cab company, we were reticent to take someone's living away without giving them a chance. Probably a forward-thinking license commission would think the same way and give them so many chances until it's time for renewal. Well, that's in 2 years. So if we keep it at 1 year, I think there would be, as stated, a little bit more accommodation to the rules. I think there would be more opportunity than to take someone who isn't really following the rules and maybe marginal to put in a new application against other applications.
Just reading the tea leaves here, I'm not going to make any formal amendment. All I will say is, it is my opinion sitting here that a lot of this ends up being pushing paper. And you know, maybe in the future, once this settles for a year or two and we see how it goes, maybe we could pursue the outdoor seating model where we did 1 year for the first run, and then if you get through that one and you're okay and you're not making material changes, not adding more trucks or however we might define that, then maybe you can get 2. So I'll hang tight on this one for today.
Girls? Unfortunately, I do have one quick amendment on Section 9, 113B, where we give ourselves freedom from the cage that now we can take a charitable or nonprofit organization and give them the right, just that the license commission have given them. But then we clip our wings by saying subject to its own rules. I'd like to say that, okay, so we have a worthwhile organization. Where can they go? We can't force them on NRA property. We can't put on waterfront trust property. So it should be subject to its rules other than location. And I'll be completely open, meaning that if we found someone that is fitting this, that they're charitable, they're nonprofit, they're perhaps giving back to the community, maybe they do belong on In Street. They wouldn't have to go out to Atkins Common.
Mr. President, that's probably my drafting error. All I meant was the rules of the city council. That's all I meant there. In other words, we just have to follow our own rules. That's all I meant.
Our procedural rules?
Yeah, procedural rules. So whatever the official name is of the rules of the city council, that's all I meant.
Fair enough.
So you could add rules of the city council.
Second, that's a motion.
That's a motion.
Can you direct us again to the document?
Page 2, bottom of the page.
9, 113, I'm sorry, page 2, B.
City Council, there's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Heck it.
Did you get that, Rich? I had subject to the rules of the City Council of the City of Newburyport, which is what we call them.
Okay, sure.
Anything else?
I hope not.
Now, a motion to approve the ordinance as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilor Connell? Yes. Councilor Cronin? Yes. Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Agaman?
Yes.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Only took a year.
Yes, Mr. President, motion to remove item communication number 91 from committee.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
Motion to receive and file. Second. Mr. President, so this is a communication from a resident, a Newburyport resident, who was, if I can now find my notes here, just had some issues with the way that the CBA had handled itself, both in terms of process and content. We voted in committee earlier this evening, 3-0, to receive and file, with the additional caveat that we're going to forward this letter to the ZBA. I'll do that as chair, or perhaps, I'll do that as chair. We are working on zoning enforcement since this letter was written in September of 2016, which we're hopeful will become full-time, and we've got a different, some ordinance to kind of assist with that zoning enforcement, and we are also going to have a joint hearing with the planning board in the next couple of weeks to look at tightening up our zoning around variances that were given. So we certainly took her, issues to heart. They echo others that we've heard in the community, and we had met with her a couple of times earlier in the winter. So again, it's a motion to receive and file.
Dr. Connell?
Just one caveat, I believe we also in committee said that we would remind the members of the board that we had suggested, and they seemed to nod in agreement, to go through some retraining with their Mass Municipal, or one of the other entities that provides training for people who serve on these boards.
Yes, we did.
Oh, nice. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to remove item communication 35.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
Motion approved. Thank you. We approved this earlier this evening with a motion to receive and file. And basically, as Councilor Eigerman has noted, there's certain professional rules of conduct in terms of lawyers representing a client before a board or commission. So what we're going to do, again, we're asking to receive and file, and I'm going to discuss with the mayor, and either with her or by myself as chair, I'm going to, there's also a couple of additional pages to the one that's in our packet, send a memo about these rules of professional conduct to any board or commission that may have clients, have lawyers appearing before it that are representing clients, just to make sure that they're aware of these rules. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say much more than that.
I had a motion to approve, but is it a motion to?
A motion to receive and file. I
Second.
misspoke. Thank you.
You got something, Council? No, oh no, sorry. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. President. One more motion to remove communication number 38 from committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Discussion, go ahead,
So,
Council.
thank you. This is the letter from the Brain Law Office. This was a couple of months ago regarding Lower Custom House Road. And the committee met earlier this evening. We voted 3-0 to receive and file this. We're going to work on an order probably for the next meeting that we're going to direct the city solicitor to move towards litigation with the entity which is occupying Lower Custom House Way. I mean, basically, we feel like this is city property, and we should have, use and access to it and possession of it. And it's been, outstanding for a long time, but, has been pointed out by several folks, dating back to 1926, it's pretty clear that this is city property, and so we're going to fashion an order to that effect. Thank you.
Councilor Cronin?
I'll be voting against receive and filing. I would suggest that this be returned to committee and we keep it on the burner until such time that we can draft something. But to receive and file it and have it just fall into the abyss of everything that's going on, I don't think is the way to go. Although, I'm not saying that we're going to ignore it, but we do get busy and summer's coming. I would much rather see this stay alive somewhere in the council.
We did discuss that. I actually proposed that, and I got persuaded to receive and file it. I mean, doesn't matter either way. We'll be coming back with an order for the next meetings.
We just put it back in committee.
All right, so I withdraw the motion to receive and file.
Withdraw the second.
Motion to send back to committee.
Second.
Yep. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. President, nothing else to report other than I had sent an email about some upcoming meetings.
Yes, we got that. Thank you very much. Public safety.
You're going to love me. Motion to remove communication 46.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve.
Discussion? Second.
Thank you. This is the Yankee Homecoming event. It's fairly broad in scope, but this covers all of the events that we all associate with Yankee Homecoming. And I know we have a couple of things on our plate regarding events in the downtown that have to be addressed. But the committee voted 2-0 to bring this out with the thought that this whole thing should be addressed holistically, and we shouldn't just be looking at Yankee Homecoming.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. One no.
One no. Next.
Motion to remove ordinance 15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good.
Motion to approve.
Second. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the ordinance about adopting a citywide 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's unfortunate that it's so late at night that we've lost our viewership.
How do you know?
Couple of things that came out of committee, 2-0. This is a local option under Chapter 90, Section 17A, that we can, as local jurisdiction, regulate 25-mile-an-hour speed zones in thickly settled zones as defined by Chapter 90, Section 1, which is the standard in Mass. This 25 zone has been implemented in numerous other communities around the area, and what they're doing is posting right at the entrances. You've probably got the memo from Deputy Director Amaral. He is not necessarily in favor of this. There are a couple or three problematic streets that do have to be addressed, but in the totality of the city, this seems to be a good thing, generally supported by many people. Just again, to point out, if it's a state road, 113, Route 1, it's not in the mix. If it's already posted, such as High Street, Low Street, Merrimack Street, Water Street, whatever the posted speed limit is, that's what the posted speed limit is. If it's a rural country road, such as maybe out in Ward 6, and it does not meet the definition of thickly settled, which is houses less than 200 feet apart for a contiguous quarter mile, then it is a 40-mile-an-hour zone. Some of the streets are Mosley Ave, maybe Ferry, maybe Graff Road. Those can be addressed, but this has been sitting in committee long enough, and I think everybody knows the ins and outs of this. So, as I said, it came out of committee 2-0.
I would ask you to support this. In Ward 4, there are a number of cross streets, Forrester, Ashland, Jefferson, Plummer, where people are cutting either from High down to Merrimack or Merrimack up to High. Oakland. Broad. But you have stop signs down there. The largest number of complaints I get is about speeding on those streets, or the perception of speeding. So I'd ask you to please pass that, and I appreciate it.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'd like maybe the clerk to chime in, since he's involved so much with parking and traffic issues, but what did the city marshals say about this? Because when I casually poked my head into a meeting that he was attending, he was very much opposed. Because of all the ins and outs, and sometimes it's 40 and sometimes it's 25, and in other places it's so much, it just seemed, from his perspective, to be a nightmare of enforcement. And if you're an ordinary person driving down the street, I think in a community this size, to know how fast, within 5 miles an hour here, or 10 miles an hour there, up and down, and up and down, and up and down, it's just bewildering and unnecessary. And I don't know if there's compelling reason. Have we had kids mowed down in the streets by people going 30 miles an hour as opposed to 25? Have we experienced some significant problems with the current speed limit? I don't see it. So I'm going to vote no against on this item.
Let's argue it.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Speaking for Ward 2, I do see it. I think basically very few streets in Ward 2 does anyone have any business going faster than 25. And so the way I understand this rule is the default is 25. So the message is going to get out. You cannot go over 25 unless there's a specific sign allowing you to go higher. So in other words, we're trying to switch the assumption. Right now, so far as I understand it, the assumption is if it's not posted, I can go as fast as I want, and devil take the hindmost. So I strongly support this as a way to flip the assumption and make the assumption, hey, you should not be speeding in Newburyport. Only if the sign says you can go faster than 25 may you.
Further discussion. Roll call.
It's a motion to approve ordinance number 15. Councilor Connell?
No.
Councilor Cronin?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Agaman?
Yes.
Councilor
Yes.
Tontar? Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Council President O'Brien?
Definitely yes.
But wait, where does it say city councilors are exempt? You forgot that.
That happens at some point. Food trucks are exempt.
Food trucks exempt.
Next.
Food trucks are exempt.
27 minutes in comment.
Only between the subsidies are
Almost done, Mr. President.
Got 25 minutes, let's go.
Okay, motion to remove communication number 54.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Very quickly, this is a charity bike ride. There's a lot of paperwork in here. It is not a race. The 100-mile route has 2.6 miles in Newburyport, according to the police. They don't even notice it comes through. It's Parker Street to Graff Road to Low Street to Pond Street, and they're out of town. It came out 2-0.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
I think there's one more.
55?
Two more.
24.
55.
55. 55 communications at 5.
Motion to remove communication 55.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Nothing further.
Fair Street.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, there is, I'm sorry. Motion to remove order 24, Fair Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's it. Public utilities?
Nothing tonight.
To the order.
I would just rise very quickly to thank the First Religious Society. You know, because of the money the CPA provided to redoing the building, the church, they volunteered to clean up a park in the city. They're talking about doing that on an annual basis. They're also holding an event this Saturday. I'm not a member of the First Religious Society, but I certainly appreciate their efforts at contributing to the community.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn? Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
I'm going to oppose.
I thank James Big Festival. Here.
We got a lot done.
Can we take the summer off? It is our job.
A lot done.